Hello? Welcome to Night, where the dark speaks and true stories haunt. This channel brings you real horror experiences, urban legends, and chilling encounters that people have truly lived through. Every episode is based on actual stories, told in a way that pulls you into the shadows. From haunted houses to unsolved disappearances, strange family secrets to ancient curses, we explore the kinds of stories that leave you questioning what's real. Perfect for late night listening or a lonely commute home. Subscribe and let the night in. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Story 1. They'll remember me as a teacher, not what I'm about to become. I've been bitten. Let's get that out of the way. I'm not making it out of here. I don't know how long I have until I'm like them. So we have to hurry, okay? I start to draw on the whiteboard. This is the school, this is a gym, and here's where the teacher's lounge is. The wound on my leg is bleeding. I know they can see it. I stop to tighten my makeshift bandage. We don't panic. I say slowly to my 7 remaining students, their faces pale and wide-eyed. We plan. They glance at each other nervously. I put on my best face. They need to be confident if this is going to work. If they freeze out there, they'll be ripped apart. I start to hand out thick textbooks to everyone. I take the last and begin to rip out the pages until only the cover remains. I tape the pageless book loosely to the forearm of Sophia, the class leader. Now, if I'm trying to bite or scratch you, I say, slowly demonstrating my point, you have a shield. Use it to escape an attack. I slowly attack Sophia. She blocks my foe's strike, and I go to bite her forearm. But the book does its job. Then, while your attacker is busy with your shield, slip out of it and run away. Like a lizard in its tail, Corey says, his scientific mind always making connections. Exactly. Get started with the books, and try not to have too much fun with it. I know you wanted to do this for a while now. The mood lightens a bit. They start on the project, reminiscent of craft time. I'm so astonished by their resiliency. I'm fully aware that my time is finite and every second counts. But I take a moment to bask in my pride. I return to the whiteboard and continue detailing the diagram in ways they would recognize. There's a tug on my shirt. It's the twins, Lena and Micah. I'm sorry. I don't think there's an exit there. Lena finishes softly, pointing at the fire escape I marked beside the east hallway. I blink, leaning closer to the board. What do you mean? Micah steps up beside her, silent as always, and opens a tattered notebook he never lets go of. There's a rough sketch inside. Our school. You made this. The detail in the sketch is impressive. It was bricked over during the summer remodel. The other side of that wall is a bathroom now. She says calmly, they're right. How could I forget that? I hand the marker to Micah, and the twins go to work on the whiteboard. I check on the others. Sophia has finished hers and is helping make extras for Lena and Micah. She's very observant and filling the need of the moment without being asked. There's a shuffling sound outside the door. Everyone stops what they're doing and watches. The blinds are down. That's typical lockdown protocol, but the slow, scraping sound of dragging or limping. A whinny is what we call them. They're the most common in the school. They drag their ribbon flesh down the halls and into classrooms while calling the name Winnie. Sophia wraps an arm around the smallest girl, Ellie. Corey places a paper shielded hand gently on her back. Winnie. It starts to bang on the door. Thump, pause. Winnie. Thump, pause. Winnie. I motion everyone to stay still and quiet. I wish I could call for help, but not even 911 is picking up. All phones do for us now is make noise, which gives me an idea. I go to Antonio and make a gesture to take out his phone. He looks at me, confused. I've written him up for being distracted with it. I know he has it. We don't have time for rules. Take out your phone, I say in a hush. I'm not taking it from you. Thump, pause. Winnie. He relents. My mom said not to tell anyone. She won't get me another, he whispers. I motion for him and everyone else to watch. I take out my phone and write my number on the whiteboard. Dial my number, and when I say so, press call. Antonio gives me a nod of acknowledgement. I motion to the largest boy, Derek, to come over to where I am. I remember his grandma showing me pictures of him playing Pee Wee baseball, and since I'm going to be controlling the door in case things get out of hand, I trust him to make the throw that will let them finish preparations. My head is starting to hurt. Derek crouches beside me, eyes flicking the door to my leg, to the phone glowing dimly in my palm. "Where do you want it?" he whispers. "Far," I say, "down by the art wing lockers. You remember how the floor slopes? Let gravity help you. It still needs a function." I hand the phone. I count down silently from 3, then open the door enough to let Derek do his thing. With a swift underhand motion, the phone goes sliding down the hallway. I slam the door hard. "Now, Antonio," I say, holding the door shut from the now aggressive Winnie pushing from the other side. A moment later, the shrill sound of my ringtone playing echoes in the hall. The door's force eases. "Winnie!" The sound of a dragging limb moves away, and with the end of the ringing also comes in a threat. For now at least, I need to sit down. I'm feeling sore and my leg feels hot. They watch me move to my chair and slump in it. Looking at them reminds me of a balloon losing air. What do we do when we're outside? Sophia asks. Look after each other. Find somewhere safe. Never stop learning. I don't know what's waiting out there, but I believe in all of you. We could go to my house. I don't have any neighbors. It's kind of far, but there's plenty of room, and my mom's been canning all summer if you like vegetables. Ellie peeps. She usually doesn't speak up in a group like this. She, like all of them, is growing up before my eyes. I wish I could go with them to ensure their safety, but that was never my job. My job has always been to prepare them for the outside world, and I hope I've done that. Everyone look at the whiteboard. Try to memorize the route outside. You can't go the way you usually would. 5 minis and it's time to go. Things are getting dizzy. They were their bravest faces. I sit behind my desk and watch them as each gives me a last look. Derek watches over Ellie. Corey holds his shield prepared for defense. Lena and Micah, navigation at the ready. Antonio gathers all the phones from the confiscation box and shoves them in his pockets. And Sophia, confident and strong. We don't panic, we plan, she says as the last of them enters the hallway. They're ready for anything. When they're gone, I just stare at their seats. I can feel the blood running down my leg and see the pool it's making underneath me. There's a sweater at one of the desks. They need every advantage they can get, I say to myself. With a groan, I get up and grab the sweater. I open the door and wonder if they would still hear me if I called to them. Winnie! Story 2. I went on a solo camping trip and saw something I'll never forget. I haven't written anything on here in years, and honestly, I didn't think I ever would. But I need to get this out while I still can, before he finds me again. I've always been a big camping guy. Getting out into the wilderness helps me reset. I'm not married, I don't have kids, and I work a desk job that keeps me staring at a screen for way too many hours a week. Camping is one of the few things that actually makes me feel normal. No phone, no distractions. Just me and nature. It's easily the greatest thing in the world. A few days ago, I decided to take a solo trip to a lake I used to visit as a kid with my dad. I wanted peace and quiet. I needed to get away. I planned to stay just a couple nights, just enough to clear my head. I packed up my gear, threw in the car, and within the hour, I was on the road. The lake wasn't far, maybe a 20-minute drive. I parked near the trailhead, grabbed my backpack, chair, and tent, and started the short hike. It's about a 10 to 15-minute walk, surrounded by tall trees and brush that look exactly the same as they did when I was little. Nothing's been trimmed in years. The thorns on some of the bushes were long enough to catch on my pants as I passed. About halfway in, I thought I heard something. A rustle, maybe 10 or 15 feet ahead of me. I stopped and listened. The sun was still out, so I should have been able to see someone, or at least an outline. But there was nothing. I took a few cautious steps forward, still scanning the trees. Nothing moved. No more sound. I brushed it off. Likely just a small animal. Eventually, the water came into view, and the trees opened up. The spot was exactly how I remembered it. Small, secluded, about half the size of a football field. A short boardwalk looks out over the lake, and thick forests surround the area on all sides. You feel completely cut off from the rest of the world out here. A huge wave of nostalgia came over me, and it felt bittersweet that I was back out here without my dad. I dropped my backpack and started setting up camp. The rest of the day went by quietly. It was really peaceful, just what I needed. By the time the sun had set, I was sitting by the stove, heating up a can of chili and watching the light go down beneath the trees. The forest was so still, like the air was holding its breath. A breeze came through, cool against my skin, a contrast to the warmth of the chili in my hands. I stared down at the dirt as I ate in silence, lost in thought. When I finally looked up, I froze. Just beyond the tree line, I saw a figure. It was standing still, half shrouded by branches, watching me. The moment my eyes met it, the figure ducked behind a tree, and I heard the dry and unnaturally quick rustle of footsteps retreating deeper into the woods. It was too dark to make out much, but it was tall, human-shaped, definitely a person. I stood, heart starting to pick up, and grabbed the flashlight and knife I'd laid beside me earlier. I didn't know if whoever that was meant harm, but I wasn't about to sit there and wait to find out. I stepped into the trees slowly, sweeping the beam of my flashlight through the underbrush, scanning every inch of the forest ahead of me. I spent another minute searching the woods, but the figure, whoever it was gone. I took a deep breath, calming my nerves down. I was still on edge, but I tried to forget about it as I made my way back to my spot, turning my flashlight off. Nothing else happened the rest of that night. I ate the rest of my chili, then stayed up a little bit reading a book before putting it down, and turning my lantern off before I went into my tent, setting my sleeping bag up and going to sleep. It took me a little while to fall asleep because I still felt uneasy. That encounter was strange, and whoever was had to be out there still. But as I was thinking about it, I fell asleep. I woke up suddenly. It didn't feel like I'd been asleep long, maybe an hour or two at most. I sat up groggy and unzipped my tent. The woods outside were still dark, silent. I poked my head out and scanned the area. Nothing. I sighed and zipped the tent shut again. Nothing had woken me up, or so I thought. I lay back down, closed my eyes, and tried to fall asleep again. Then I heard it, a clunk, what sounded like my lantern tipping over and hitting the ground just outside the tent. The sound wasn't loud, but it was sharp and sudden, and it jolted me upright. I leaned forward, hand on my flashlight, and unzipped the tent just a few inches to listen. The night was still, only the faint splash of the lake and the occasional breeze in the trees. My lantern had fallen over, I could see that now, but the wind hadn't been strong enough to do it, not even close. I glanced toward the trees, and that same feeling returned, that tight, cold unease in my chest. I didn't see anything out there, but I didn't feel alone, not even a little. I zipped the tent shut again and sat there in silence, gripping the flashlight, trying to convince myself I was just being paranoid. It took me a long time to fall asleep again. The next morning, I'd almost forgotten the whole thing. I rubbed my eyes, stretched, and stepped out of the tent into the crisp morning air. I grabbed a small bucket from my backpack and started toward the lake to get some water to wash up. That's when I saw them. Footprints, clear as day, pressed deep into the dirt at the edge of the water. I froze. The prints weren't facing the lake. They were facing away from it, toward my campsite. I followed them with my eyes, my chest tightening with each step. The prints led straight from the water to my tent and stopped there. My heart dropped. I wasn't paranoid. Someone had come out of that lake and stood right where I slept. I didn't know what to think. If that person came back, how could they have come from the water? Why would they? It didn't make any sense. I stared into the lake like I expected to see something floating. A raft, a wetsuit, anything, but the water was still, just ripples and reflection. My hands were trembling a bit as I filled the bucket. I tried to keep it together on the walk back to camp, but I'll be honest, I was shaken. I looked around as I moved, scanning the trees, expecting to see someone step out at any second. No one did. I warmed the water on my stove and used a washcloth to clean up, just trying to distract myself. While I scrubbed my arms and face, I kept thinking, trying to rationalize. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe some jackass was hiding out here trying to scare hikers for fun. But who would go to those lengths just to knock over a lantern and leave muddy footprints? It felt too deliberate, like it was staged for me. After drying off, I went to clip my knife back onto my belt, but it wasn't there. I checked around the stove, near the sleeping bag, and inside the tent. Nothing. My stomach dropped. I could have sworn I set it beside me the night before, but now it was just gone. I stood there for a minute, feeling like an idiot. That was the one thing I didn't want to lose. I told myself maybe I left it somewhere when I searched the woods. Still, I didn't like the idea of not having it on me, not with whatever was going on out here. I didn't do much the rest of the morning. Ate a little, tried reading again, but couldn't focus. I even went fishing, but it didn't feel right. For the hour I was at the lake, I felt like I was being watched. Every sound felt amplified. Every twig crack made me flinch. I didn't want to admit it to myself, but I was considering packing up and heading out early. At some point in the afternoon, I decided to walk the trail a little bit, not far, just enough to stretch my legs and get away from the tent. I needed to clear my head. About 5 minutes into the trail, I passed a tree with something etched into the bark. My name, not just scratched in, carved. Deep, jagged letters. My full name, first and last. And right at the base of the tree was my knife, just lying there like someone had placed it on display. I stared at it, my heart pounding. I hadn't brought anything sharp enough to do that kind of carving besides that knife, and I damn sure didn't do it myself. I looked over my shoulder, then down at the knife again. The bark was still fresh. Damn, whatever carved my name into that tree had done it recently, like hours ago. I picked the knife up slowly, trying to keep my breathing steady. My hands felt clammy. That was the moment something clicked in my brain. This wasn't just a trespasser. It knew my name. I suddenly thought I needed proof. I could show the police. The footprints by the lake, the carving in the tree. I brought my phone along for emergencies, but I'd left it in my backpack back at the campsite. I turned and headed back. Fast. The whole walk I felt like something was behind me. Not close, but just far enough to stay hidden. I didn't stop to look. I didn't want to know. When I got back to the site, my heart sank. My backpack was open, but I knew I'd zipped it shut. I spun around, scanning the woods, half expecting to see someone standing there watching me. No one. Gritting my teeth, I dropped to my knees and started digging through the bag. My clothes were still there. So were the snacks, the first aid kit, and my water bottle. But the phone was gone. Someone had been here. They'd gone through my stuff, moved things around like they were looking for something, and they took my phone. I sat back on the dirt and let out a frustrated yell, gripping my face in my hands. My breathing was heavy and scattered. I stayed like that for a while, just thinking. I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to stay another second. But when I looked up, the sun had already dipped low behind the treetops. I had no idea what time it was without my phone, but the sky was dimming fast. I ran through options in my head. The hike back to the car was 15 minutes, maybe less if I was moving fast and not watching every branch. And then what? Drive down an empty road with something possibly following me? With this thing still out here? If it had wanted to hurt me, wouldn't it have already? I hated it, but a part of me thought I'd be safe for staying put until the morning. Maybe I'd even catch it and see who it really was. I don't know. I was scared, but I was also pissed off. Whoever was out there had taken my phone, carved my name into a tree, walked right up to my tent, and stood there while I slept. If it came back tonight, I wasn't going to just sit and wait. I had a plan. I spent the next hour setting up a trap. Nothing fancy. Just some fishing line I tied between nearby trees, about knee-high, with a few metal spoons I had brought and a can hanging from it. It circled around my tent in a wide loop. If anything got close, I'd hear it. I took a step back and admired my masterpiece. This had to work. Once I was satisfied, I tried to relax. I warmed up a can of soup and sat by the fire with my bowl in hand, trying to pretend this was just another night. I rocked in my chair, looking at the lake and zoning out as I thought back to when I was a kid, maybe 7 or 8. My dad used to bring me here almost every weekend. He'd make a fire, cook hot dogs, and let me drink root beer from his camping mug while we watched the stars, and he'd tell me stories from when he was a kid. I always loved those nights. Some of my favorite memories with my dad are from out here, and whenever I was out here with him, he was quieter and softer than usual. At home, he was a typical dad, being a hard ass on us, but out here, it's like he felt calmer. There was one trip I never forgot, and it was the last trip we ever took out here. I was already in the tent, bundled in a sleeping bag, getting cozy, when I heard my dad walking around outside. Then I heard his voice, low, sharp, like he was talking to someone. I peeked out and saw him standing by the edge of the trees with his flashlight raised, staring into the woods. His eyes were wide, and his breaths weren't composed like they normally were. When I asked him what he was doing, he didn't answer right away. He seemed like he was in a trance, but eventually he looked at me. "A kid," he said. He told me not to worry about it. Probably just a fox or some other animal. But I remember his face. He looked scared. I'd never seen my dad like that. Not before, not after. I think I forgot that memory until now. And I realized at that moment that something about this felt too similar to what my dad experienced out here. And I remember that after that night, my dad became way more protective of me than he was before. Whenever I asked if we could come here again, he would immediately shut the idea down and tell me to never bring it up again. As a kid, I never understood why my dad was making such a big deal, but something began clicking inside of my brain, and I felt my hands grow cold even as I held a hot bowl of soup. That's when I heard it. The faint clink of metal just behind the tent. My body stiffened. I slowly set the bowl down and grabbed my flashlight and knife, my heart already racing. I turned, just in time to see a figure duck behind the back of the tent. It moved like a person, but too fast, almost like it knew how to avoid being seen. I tried taking deep breaths, but I found it difficult to compose myself. Words cannot describe how terrified I was. I stepped forward, carefully, keeping my light low and trying not to make noise as I circled around the other side of the tent. I swallowed hard, preparing myself, but just as I rounded the corner, something rustled behind me. I jumped and spun around and saw a raccoon dart out of the brush, crashing through some leaves as it vanished into the trees. "Jesus," I muttered, stumbling back a step. Then I heard a soft splash from behind me. I turned back, not seeing a figure behind the tent anymore. I then looked toward the lake and raised my light. The surface of the water rippled, not violently, but as if something had just entered it. I stepped closer, scanning the shoreline. Nothing, just the circles widening out over the dark water. Whatever was there, whoever that was, they were gone again. I started questioning if this was a person now. How were they that quick? If they were a person, they'd have to come up from the water eventually, but as I waited for a minute, I never saw anyone come up to the surface. I stood there in disbelief, heart pounding. My thoughts raced, but none of them made sense. People don't move like that. People can't just disappear into the water like that. That thought stayed in my mind for the remainder of the night. After that, I was done with this and went into my tent to go to sleep, so I could leave first thing in the morning, but I couldn't go to sleep right away. I just laid there, thinking. I might have laid there for a couple hours before something snapped me out of my daze. Footsteps. I froze, my heart in my throat. The footsteps were gentle and steady yet intentional. Whatever was slowly circled around my tent a couple times, and the entire time I was trying my hardest to not make a single sound. I'd never been more scared in my life. I held the sleeping bag to my chest tightly, shutting my eyes as the footsteps continued around my tent. And for the first time in my life, I started praying to God under my breath. Then, The footsteps stopped in front of my tent. I opened my eyes, staring ahead. I felt their presence. I knew they were standing there, and they knew I was there. A minute passed by with nothing happening. They didn't walk away. Then it spoke. "I see you." My heart stopped. It was my voice. Raspy, hollow, and wrong. Then I heard it sprint away into the woods. I exploded out of the tent, throwing my gear together. I didn't care that it was midnight. I was getting the fuck out of there. As I was packing, I heard movements in the woods ahead, where it had run. I stopped, then, with trembling hands, I pointed my flashlight and turned it on. This time, it didn't hide. The light engulfed it, and I nearly let out a scream. It was me. Wet, face rotten, bloated, and bruised. Its right shoulder bone stuck out through torn skin. Its knees looked infected. Its face, my face, was pale and corpse-like. It stared at me, expressionless. As I stood there, trying to process what I was seeing, the thing suddenly charged at me, faster than anything I'd ever seen. Before I could even react, it slammed into me and wrapped its hands around my neck, beginning to choke me. It shoved me back against the tent, its eyes locked with mine, staring into me like it was trying to become me. I gasped and clawed at its arms, trying to break free, but it was impossibly strong. It didn't flinch. I could feel tears welling in my eyes as I was forced to stare into its face, the distorted version of my own, its bored expression maintained. My vision started to blur. I could feel myself slipping away as the pressure tightened, my limbs going numb. Instinct took over as I fumbled blindly at my side, fingers wrapping around the handle of my knife. I drew it and drove it into its eye with all my strength. It staggered back, finally releasing me as I collapsed to my knees, coughing and gasping for air. It didn't scream or make any noise for that matter. It just grunted, low and guttural, as it reached up and slowly pulled the knife out of its socket. Now, its left eye was just a black, hollow void. I didn't wait. I scrambled to my feet and bolted for the trail, leaving everything behind. I could hear it following, but slower now, almost like it was playing with me. By the time I reached the edge of the woods and saw my car, my legs felt like they were about to give out. I fumbled with the keys, nearly dropping them before unlocking the door. But something made me stop and look back before getting in. There was, at the top of the trailhead, watching me. It didn't chase me or move. It just stood there. I jumped in, started the car, and drove out as fast as I could. It never moved, just kept watching as I sped away. When I got home, it felt like I had just escaped hell. I didn't even make it to the shower. I collapsed face first onto my bed and blacked out. Even now, I can't process what I saw. Even writing this, I don't even think I'm describing it in well enough detail. I can't stop thinking about it, that it was me the whole time, that it looked like me, moved like me, even spoke like me, still shakes me to my core. And I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. Every second. The next morning, I woke up and immediately felt off. I opened my eyes and felt the chill in the air before I saw the fabric around me. I was back in the tent, at the lake. I sat up, dazed. Had I never left? Was it all a dream? Then I saw something outside, lie on the ground just in front of the tent. It was a photograph. I stepped out slowly and picked it up. It was an old Polaroid of my dad, standing in our childhood home. It was a picture I hadn't seen in years. My hands trembled as I turned it over. On the back, in handwriting identical to mine, were 3 words. See you soon. Story 3. I took a job watching security cameras on a remote island. There's no one left to call. 3 weeks ago, I accepted a contract job that sounded too good to be true. For $1,000 a week to monitor a private research facility security feeds on a remote island. The gig came through a defense subcontractor I freelanced for. Short term, solo placement. Everything provided. Food, shelter, satellite comms, and complete autonomy. No tourists, no locals, just me and the monitors. I figured it'd be peaceful. They flew me in by helicopter. No pilot chit-chat. Just a 45-minute ride over gray water and endless clouds. When we landed, the facility looked like something from a Cold War movie. Squat concrete buildings, wind-bent trees, and antennas point at the sky like dead fingers. The handoff was quick. A clipboard, a list of passwords. A man in a black coat I never saw again. They told me my only job was to watch the cameras. There are 78 feeds in total. Hallways, labs, exterior fences, server rooms. Most are empty. Always have been. The only regular activity is the wind shaking branches outside or the slow rotation of fans in the ceiling. I asked once what happened to the staff. The reply came through the satellite phone in a text-only message. You are not authorized for that data. By day 3, I was talking to myself just to hear a voice. By day 5, I started sleeping next to the main console. I stopped checking the calendar on day 8. Then, last night, camera 12 went dark. It's one of the hallway feeds on sublevel 3. I didn't think much of it. The wiring's old, and some of the cameras flicker in bad weather. But when I went to check the breaker box, there was no sublevel 3 listed. Just 2 floors on the diagram, ground and sublevel 1. Still, camera 12 existed. It had always been there. I'd seen that hallway loop for days. An empty, sterile corridor. Until it wasn't. At 2:46 a.m., camera 12 came back online. But the hallway was different. The lights were dimmer. The walls had stains on them. Smears of something dark, like rust or dry blood. And down at the end of the hallway was a figure. Not moving, not walking, just standing, facing the camera. I tried zooming in, but the feed began to blur. The figure didn't react. It just stood there, perfectly still, arms at its sides, like it had been waiting for me to look. I called the emergency contact number. It rang, and rang. Then the feed cut to static. Not just camera 12, but all 78 cameras. My console rebooted. When the system came back up, camera 12 was gone, like it had never been part of the grid. This morning, I tried to leave. The helipad is still there, but no radio signal is getting out. The satellite phone just flashes and no link. The backup generator is working fine. Everything else is powered. But I'm alone. Worse, the supply crates in the back room, the ones marked for month 2 and month 3, were already open. Empty. I think they knew. I think this was the real job. Not to monitor anything. Not to report anything. But to be here. To be alone. I've started hearing humming through the walls. Faint mechanical tones like a lullaby through static. They're not coming from the speakers or equipment. They're coming from beneath the floor. And sometimes when I sleep, I dream of a hallway I've never been in. Dim lights, cracked tile, a figure at the end of it, not moving, just waiting. If you're reading this, if the connection somehow pushed this through, don't reply. Don't come. I think I'm already part of whatever this place is. I think the next person they send will be watching me. Story 4. I work on a fishing boat in the middle of the ocean. Here are the rules to survive. I work on a fishing boat in the middle of the ocean. Here are the rules to survive. I'm first mate Samuel Briggs, but everyone on board just calls me Sam. I've been working on the fishing vessel, the SS Minnow, for about 5 years now, and I know this place from bow to stern. But it wasn't always that way. When I first started here, the captain didn't much like any of us new deckhands. He was a grizzled old man, looked maybe 60 or so, but he was built like a full-grown grizzly bear. Apparently the old crew had left, or something, so me and 2 others, Zach and Kylie, signed on to take their place. We were fresh-faced and had never been out at sea before, and the captain didn't take too kindly to that. When we stepped on board the first day, he pointed to a list of guidelines on the wall. He had the same list posted all over the ship, and he wouldn't let us cross the threshold until we'd read every single rule. I needed the money, so I figured an eccentric boss wouldn't be too much to deal with. I'll run you through the rules and my personal experiences with them, so you'll be better informed if you ever find yourself aboard. Rule number 1, what the captain says, goes. So this one sounds pretty benign, but it really isn't. My first experience with this one came on our first day in the open water. I was in the hell with the captain, and Zach, when we heard a knock at the right door. I went to go get it, but the captain stopped me. He just said, wait, and looked like he was listening for something. We were confused, thinking that it was probably just Kylie, so we waited a second while the knocking continued, and eventually Zach went for the door, but the captain smacked his hand as he reached for the doorknob. Wait. He said again, more stern this time. The knocking got more desperate for a solid minute or so when from the left helm door behind us came Kylie none the wiser. The instant she entered, the knocking on the right door stopped. Both Zach and myself were just left confused and looking at the captain for answers. He only said, rule number 1, boys. If I tell you to wait, you damn well better wait, or next time you're losing that hand. Rule number 2, if you hear singing from a net, cut it loose immediately. This one is going to be a little harder to explain. And if you don't believe me, honestly, I can't blame you. I first experienced this a few weeks into the job. I was sent to the deck to check the nets to make sure they were holding. When out of one of them, I could hear it. I honestly couldn't believe it, but I heard honest to God singing coming from one of the nets. I looked down into it over the deck, and I could see something big moving around in there. The silhouette looked almost like a person, but I couldn't see much. But I remembered the rule, so I started cutting the net loose. As I was using my knife to sever the line, I saw it. A hand lunged up and grabbed the line. It was human-shaped, but it was covered in these red fish scales, and it had claws as long as a paring knife. I cut faster, and the net dropped back into the ocean. As it fell, the song turned into this horrible screaming that grew more distant as the boat pushed forward until eventually it was gone. Rule number 3. If you see a lighthouse, inform the captain immediately. I didn't understand this one at all. On the maps we had, there were no lighthouses in the area we patrolled. I wasn't the one who experienced this one. Not long after my encounter with rule number 2, Kylie came running onto the deck where the captain, Zach, and I were hauling in some nets. She said she spotted a lighthouse about 2 clicks west of us, and when we looked that way, she was right. Seemed normal to me. I figured the maps just hadn't been updated in a while. But the captain immediately ran to the helm and turned the boat due east with a ferocity I'd never seen out of the old man. But soon we all realized why. As we looked west toward the lighthouse, it began to sing below the waves until the light was completely submerged. It continued to move until it was out of view, but I could sweat for a few moments. The light looked like it was attached to something massive. I'd rather not think of what could have happened if we'd gotten closer. Rule number 4. If a fog rolls over the ship, stay inside until it passes. This one didn't come into play till the end of my first month. We had gone into a pretty calm area, and I was prepping the nets with Zach when we saw the fog coming from the distance. We got inside at the last minute and radioed the captain to tell him we were all right. Apparently him and Kylie were stuck in the helm. He told us, no matter what you see or hear, you stay inside the goddamn ship. I hear so much as a whisper about going out there. So help me God, I'll strangle you to death myself. With words of wisdom like that, how could we argue? Zach and I were stuck in the living quarters for the next couple hours. The fog was so thick we couldn't see out the windows, but something creeping at the back of my neck made me feel like something could see us. Zach went to look outside, but as soon as he got to the window, he jumped back and his breeze became quickened. I could hear his heart racing from a few feet away. "Do not look out there," he said between shaky breaths. I couldn't help my curiosity, and I looked through the window, and surrounding the ship, I saw hundreds, maybe thousands of faces in the fog. The ship was airtight, but I could see they were screaming, their eyes sunken and withered, their expressions full of sorrow but also pure hatred. I too stumbled back at the sight, and Zach gave me a quick slap to the back of my head. "I told you not to look, you dense bastard." I admitted he was right, and we decided to stay away from the windows until the fog had cleared. Rule number 5. If you see another ship, check if it's occupied. I encountered this one within the first week, when I still wasn't quite used to the rules. I could see another ship in the distance that was on course to pass right by us and didn't think much of it. Luckily, Kylie was there. She remembered the rules a lot faster than me. She saw the ship and used binoculars to look it over, running over to us to tell us there was nobody on the ship. I looked for myself, and she was right. Completely empty, and she was still running like it had a full crew. We went to the captain and told him. He calmly walked outside and pulled a bell from his pocket. He rang it 3 times and went back inside. We were all pretty confused, but within moments the other ship changed course away from us, and soon it was beyond our sight. Rule number 6. If you enter a room and the lights turn off, do not move. This one I experienced myself shortly after rule number 5, and it's what made me take the rules more seriously than I did before. I had entered the boiler room to do some routine maintenance when the lights shut off in an instant. As soon as they were out, it was like the air in the room left with them. I remembered at least this rule, as it puzzled me when I saw in the list. So I sat completely still, but that didn't stop me from hearing it. Something big slithered around in the pitch blackness. It occasionally made a sound like a bear's roar mixed with a human scream. I felt it touch my face. It had human-like hands, but they were rail-thin, etching along my facial features. It was like it was studying me, or trying to trick me into moving. I held strong for 2 hours before the lights returned, and all that was left was some kind of slime trail on the ground, and a few broken scales that probably fell off the damn thing. That night, I spent hours memorizing the rules. I wasn't going to take the risk of not knowing what to do in a situation like that. Better safe than sorry. Rule number 7. If a woman in a white dress appears on the deck, stay out of sight. I won't lie, this rule really scared me. But for the first 2 years working on the ship, I never encountered her. None of US did. But regardless, we stayed on watch at the mere chance. One day, though, it finally happened. I was working with Zach out on the deck hauling in the nets when out of nowhere we heard footsteps behind us. I turned around and saw her. She was absolutely massive and rail-thin with a dirty white dress. A wide brim hat covered her face, but what I could see was her arms hanging down and nearly touching the floor with long machete-length claws scraping the deck. Luckily, before she saw me and I dove behind some crates. But Zach didn't move in time. He turned, and without making a sound, one of her arms whipped up and her claws stabbed completely through his chest. She lifted him up and began to laugh before wrapping her other hand around his head, muffling his screams. With one twist, she wrenched his head off and tossed his corpse overboard. I stayed behind those boxes for about 20 minutes until I knew it was safe. Once I stepped out, all that was left of Zach was a red stain streaking along the deck. I walked to the helm where Kylie and the captain were charting our navigation. I didn't even know what to say. They looked at me and immediately knew what had happened. Rule number 7. I said with barely enough air to choke out the words. We held a memorial for him, and the captain put his picture on a wall in his quarters. We hadn't been allowed in there before, but he wanted to show us. He pointed to the wall, which was covered in pictures of other people, brave sailors. One and all, we understood. We weren't just fishing out here. The minnow was the only thing keeping these things at bay. Rule number 8. Leave 2 pounds of fish in the storage bay each day. This job would usually fall to Zach, but after he was gone I volunteered to take over. The captain explained to take 2 pounds out of whatever the nets haul in and take it down to the storage bay. Then to leave on the ground in the middle of the room and run away as fast as possible and lock the door behind me. I was a bit nervous, but if Zach could do it, so could I. I took the fish and put them in the bag and readied myself at the door of the storage bay. I flung open the door and placed the bag as instructed before turning and running faster than I ever had. Whatever was in there was right behind me. I heard the sound of tendrils and heavy labored breathing just inches from my back. I reached the door and slammed it behind me as something thudded against it on the other side. I heard it go back to the fish and begin to eat. That's one day done. Rule number 9. If you see ice on the water, don't touch it. It had been 2 years since Zach's death, and we managed to live within the rules decently enough. But still we never ran into rule number 9. Storms, fog, waves, every other force of nature came down on our heads, but never any ice. Until one day when Kylie spotted some off the side of the deck. That little bit was a precursor of what was to come, because soon we had entered a massive ice field. The captain had us bundle up as the temps outside the ship hit sun-zero temperatures. We had to be constantly watching the machines just so they didn't freeze. Kylie kept us going more than the captain did. She'd learned that ship and those machines like the back of her hand. Eventually, we got everything under control, and the ice field seemed to subside. We all took a few moments to collect ourselves. But in that one moment when our guards were down, the boat crashed into a mass of ice, sending splinters all over the deck. The captain and I would have been hit, but Kylie pushed us out of the way. By the time we turned around and understood what had happened, it was already too late. When the ice touched her, it spread within seconds, completely turning Kylie into an icy statue before we could even say a word. The air was silent until we could hear the splintering and snapping of ice. Soon the statue that was once our friend shattered into a million pieces and melted, washing over the side of the deck. She saved us, but we couldn't save her, and her picture joined Zach's on the wall. After 5 years on the ship, I've learned to deal with every last creature and anomaly that came our way. Feeding that thing in the cargo hold doesn't even make me sweat anymore. When the lights go off, I look at that thing like an old friend and wait it out. I keep my own bell for the ghost ships. I look out the window whenever there's fog, and I stare at those faces right back. I cut the nets loose before those things can get out a second note. The woman in white hasn't had so much as a glimpse of me. The ice has never scraped my skin, and I can spot a fake lighthouse from a mile away. These things may have taken my friends from me, but the captain and I will never back down, and their sacrifices will never be in vain. Which reminds me of the final rule. Rule number 10. The minnow must always have a crew, and we're stopping for new recruits at the port today. I know one day the captain's picture and my own will be up on that wall. But until that day comes, I'm going to make sure every day that those new sailors know the rules front to back, and that one day their pictures may adorn the wall. But this damn sea can only take us when it earns us. Story 5. Free regular fries. Free regular fries. That was what brought me into Captain Clucky's that day. I stood there in line behind two middle-aged women who were taking a rather long time to place their order, whereas my mind by the Pixies played over the restaurant speakers. Over the music, I could hear the man in the dirty, ragged clothes out front, still yelling about the end of days. I did my best to ignore him, just like everyone else. I turned back to look out the window, past a ragged man, and across the street to the bus station. I thought about how I should have been out of this backwoods town and on my way back to Chicago by now. Unfortunately, my car had broken down a mile outside of the town of Pleasance. The town mechanic said he could have a part in sometime next week, but I had no intention of hanging around that long. Double unfortunately, the bus to the city didn't run until the next morning. So, for the time being, I was marooned here. I glanced down at the receipt in my hand. The attached coupon read, "Free regular fries with next purchase." I had gotten a Clucky combo meal earlier that day, and with nothing else to do, I decided to grab my extra fries and loiter around town till morning. I was low on cash, so a room at the local motel wasn't in the cards. I checked my watch, 7:35 p.m., only about 13 hours to go. I thought to myself. I glanced up to the ladies ahead of me, still talking over their order. The door chimed behind me, and a group of teenagers came in, laughing and talking loudly. I gave them a cursory glance, and noticed one of them wore clothes that weren't quite in the style of the others, an old Letterman jacket and jeans instead of the t-shirts and shorts the others wore. I noticed the bruising on his throat, and made a note to myself to not make eye contact with that particular young man. I was sandwiched between the two chatty Cathys and the obnoxious teenagers, and my social anxiety was climbing to fever pitch. Not only that, but the nicotine itch was beginning to set in. I shrugged to myself and stepped out of line. I was in no hurry after all. Stepping out into the warm summer evening, I looked up orange and purple sky. The sky seemed so clear out here away from the city. I pulled my crumpled pack of cigarettes out of the pocket of my thrift store Hawaiian shirt as the ragged man continued his tirade a few feet away from me. I lit my cigarette and continued to ignore him. After a moment, he noticed me and stepped over. Directly in front of me, "They are here. You all must leave this place. Don't you understand? They are beneath US. They are among US. And they will come for you all. You think you know the truth. You think you know what comes after, but you are all wrong. All of you. They will devour you. They will hollow you out and fill you with hatred and rot. Rot! Rot!" I inhaled the smoke and focused on the setting sun, doing my best to ignore the man's putrid breath as he screamed in my face. I exhaled and watched the smoke drift to the man's face before calmly moving to lean against the restaurant wall. I didn't react to the man, didn't acknowledge him. I couldn't if I did. He would never leave me alone. Eventually, he went back to his place on the sidewalk and started his speech all over again. I glanced over at him, standing there shouting, begging to be heard, preaching his heart out to an absent congregation. I pitied him, what he was. I wondered at the circumstances that brought him to that place. After smoking another cigarette and doomed scrolling on my phone for a few minutes, I went back inside and found that the line had dissipated. The cashier from earlier was gone, replaced by a pimple-faced kid with a name tag that read Jimmy. His head hung low as I approached the counter. Probably looking at his phone, I thought, "Welcome to Captain Clucky's. How may I help you?" His voice carried such melancholy that I assumed those other teens had been giving the poor kid a hard time. "I'll take a small soda and a free regular fries," I said, laying the coupon on the counter. The kid looked up at me slowly, his eyes finding mine, and studied me for a moment. Suddenly his mouth dropped open in a dopey smile, and he turned and headed back into the kitchen, muttering something about being right back. I stood there confused. The hell was that about? I wondered. After a few minutes, the cashier from earlier came out from the kitchen and saw me. "Sorry about the wait, sir. What can I get you?" he said, stepping up to the counter. I squinted and looked back to the kitchen. "What happened to the other guy?" "Other guy?" he asked. "What other guy?" Then it hit me. "Shit," I muttered under my breath. I glanced around the restaurant. The chatty Cathys were nearby, watching me curiously. From their point of view, I had just placed my order to thin air. So, I looked like a crazy person. That was fine. Maybe I was. Who the fuck cares? I looked back at the group of teens. They were still in their own world, still being obnoxious. But the out-of-place one, he was watching me now. I did my best not to meet his eyes, but I knew he could see me. He knew I could see him. I fucked up. Looks like it's time to go. I turned to head for the door and saw the ragged man standing outside. I needed to compose myself before leaving. I was rattled. I needed to clear my head, be alone for a moment. In the bathroom, I splashed water on my face and studied myself in the mirror. I looked older than my 25 years. My shaggy, sandy blonde hair was now streaked with silver, and the lines on my face were more careworn than they once were. "Hi there," came the voice from behind me. Jimmy, the other cashier, was there. I tried to act like I didn't hear him. Looked through him when I turned around. Tried all the usual tricks. But when I went to open the door, Jimmy stepped in my way and I hesitated. "I know you can see me," he said, his eyes burrowing into mine. Yeah, the jig was up. I do my best to avoid these situations. Otherwise, they never leave me alone. Always seems to be just a little more unfinished business. I sighed, "What do you want?" He laughed. "How?" He asked, "How can you see me? Can you see others?" I shook my head. "Doesn't matter. I can see you. I can hear you. Tell me what you want or leave me alone." Okay, he said. "I'm sorry, I haven't spoken to anyone in, well, I'm not sure how long. Your car broke down, right? It's a small town, people gossip, and all I can do is listen. Well, until now." He smiled wide. I nodded and made a get on with it motion. "Well, there are others here. They want what I want. Maybe you can talk to them too? I'll go." "No," I demanded, grabbing his arm before he could leave. "No others, that's the deal. You already know I can't change that. I help you, and you never mention this to anyone else. Got it? He stared down at my hand on his arm. Holy crap, you can actually touch me. His eyes shot up to mine. That's the deal, got it? He nodded. Okay, yeah, deal. I let go of his arm. Icy pain was radiating up my arm from my hand. I'll never get used to how it feels to touch the dead. They have substance, but at the same time they don't. Like trying to hold on to frozen mist. So, what do you want? I asked again. He smiled. Well, my name is Jimmy, he said, pointing at his name tag. And I was murdered. He turned to show me a series of stab wounds on his back. I nodded. And you wanted to find the killer, right? Oh, no, he said, still smiling. I know who it was. He got away with it. But he died a few months ago. Heart attack. And he saw me as he passed. It was very cathartic. Okay, so what do you want? I asked. Will, here's the thing. And you might want to brace yourself because this is a big ask. What was your name, by the way? My name is Jonas. I said, now please, for the love of God, tell me what you want. Oh, like the Weezer song, neat. Okay, well, here goes. So, the man that killed me also killed several other people around town, mostly just drifters and the like. No one who would be missed. Only he wasn't the only one. He was actually a member of some kind of cult based here in Pleasance. I'm not sure what their practices or goals are, aside from killing lots of folks. But I do know that whatever they're planning, it will be coming to a head soon. I've heard lots of hushed talk about the new moon and rituals and a lot of other such stuff. I think they want to open some kind of doorway to somewhere. But I really can't be sure. You really never can tell with these culty types. So, my request is that you, Jonas, seek out the members of this cult and put a stop to whatever they're cooking up. I took a breath and blew out my cheeks. So there's a cult? Yes. And they are doing something big on a new moon? He nodded, correct. Which is tonight. His smile faltered a little but didn't go away altogether. I guess so. I leaned back against the sink and crossed my arms. So, you want me, one mentally unstable guy, to find and stop a whole ass cult from opening up some kind of doorway or something, and you want me to do it tonight? Like right now? Does that about sum it up? His smile had completely melted away as I laid it all out. He said, it sounds like a lot when you say it like that. Goodbye, Jimmy, I said as I brushed past him and out the door. Of course, he followed me. Hey, wait, he yelled across the restaurant as I made my way to the exit. Don't follow me, I said over my shoulder. Are you all right, sir? The cashier asked as I passed the counter. I ignored him and pushed through the door, also ignoring the still ranting ragged man on the sidewalk. If the kid was right, and there really was some kind of cult here doing something tonight, I wanted to get as far away from here as possible. I was halfway down the block when I heard the dead cashier calling out to me again. I know it's a lot, but what are the odds of you, of all people, showing up here right at this time? That's either one heck of a coincidence, or you are meant to be here. I believe you are here for a reason, Jonas. I pulled out my phone and held it to my ear. If anyone happened to be watching, I was just taking a phone call. I'm here because my car broke down. There is no other reason. Besides, even if I wanted to help, it isn't possible. I don't know the first thing about dealing with cults or whatever. Now stop following me. It is possible if we work together, if we have faith. Faith! I laughed. Faith in what? In people? The universe? God? How can you not have faith? With your gift. Gift? My gift. I said, cutting him off. You want to talk about gifts, about beliefs? I shook my head. Let me tell you a story. See, the original owner of the house I grew up in fell asleep with a lit cigarette in his hand. The house was almost a total loss, but my folks happened to come along and got the place for a steal. Would you like to take a guess which room he died in? I asked. Every night he stood at the foot of my bed, tears running down burnt and blackened cheeks, going on and on about how he was a good Christian, how he shouldn't still be here. And when he found out I could see him, what happened? He screamed, raged, begged me to help him, demanded I help him. And did you? I was 9 years old. What the fuck could I have done? Jimmy said nothing, so I continued. It wasn't long after that he realized he could make physical contact with me. Jimmy winced. Yeah, now he had someone to take out all his anger and frustration on. Didn't you tell your parents? He asked. Of course I did, and they sent me to therapy. And therapy led to doctors, which led to medication, then to psyche wards. No one believed me. Do you have any idea how many people die in those places? Do you think they move on when they do? I shook my head. I just thought the burn man was bad. Is that your idea of a gift? He began to speak, then trailed off. Yeah, I wouldn't know what to say either. You want to know what I believe, kid? I believe that God, if he's even still around, either hates us or doesn't give a shit about us anymore. That's not true, he said. I chuckled. Look at yourself, kid. If you're such a faithful believer, then why are you still here? I don't know, he shouted. But there has to be a reason. I have to believe I'm here for something. I shrugged at him and turned to leave. Sorry, kid. I'm all out of faith. Please, Jonas. He continued. Fine. Don't do it for me or faith or God or any of that. Do it for the innocents that haven't died yet. Please help me stop them from killing anyone else. I stopped. I didn't want to deal with this. Didn't want to know about some cult in the middle of nowhere. But now I did. And if he was right, people could die tonight. Innocent people. How would I feel if I could have stopped it and didn't? What would that kind of decision do to whatever is left of my own soul? Shouldn't I at least look into it and see if anything can be done? I sighed. God damn it. Jimmy smiled when I turned around. Where and when is this ritual happening? I asked, so you'll help? I don't know. I don't know if there's anything I can do. But I have nothing else to do and nowhere to go, so I might as well check it out. So where's it happening? He shrugged. I don't know for sure where, but it has to be happening soon, right? I looked as the last rays of sunlight sank below the horizon. Yeah, I'd say so. Okay. Do you know of any other members of the cult? Where do they live? Jimmy thought for a moment. I know that Mr. Patterson, the school science teacher, and Greasy Bob, the guy who runs a gas station, are both members. I've heard them discussing some horrible things inside Clucky's, but I've never been to where they live. You'd have to go without me. Shit. Funny thing about ghosts, if they had never been there when they were alive, they can't go there when they're dead. No, if I'm doing this, I'll need someone watching my back. Just then flashing red and blue lights pulled up next to me and stopped. Jimmy stood there, his legs vanishing into the hood of the town sheriff's car. Evening, son. He said it friendly enough, though he eyed me suspiciously. Evening. I nodded back in greeting. What can I do for you, officer? He pushed an oversized cowboy hat up on his head. Well, we got a call about somebody out here by the Cluckies having conversations with himself. Would you happen to know anything about that? I smiled. Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. I must look like a crazy person. I was talking on the phone. I have a Bluetooth earpiece. I said, pointing at my ear, which was fortunately covered by my long hair. The sheriff nodded. Oh, I see. Well, I suppose that makes a little more sense. Although, you're not from around here, are you? What brings you to town? No, sir. My car broke down and is in the shop here. Should be fixed sometime next week, but I'm leaving on the bus in the morning. Okay, so where are you staying tonight? He asked. I shrugged. Honestly, I haven't quite figured that out yet. He studied me for a moment. Well, we have a fine motel in town, and if needs we have a cell or two empty at the station. Come on by, if you can't find somewhere. It ain't the Ritz, but you won't be on the street. I smiled and nodded. Thank you, sir. I might just do that. He nodded back. Tell them Sheriff Reed sent you. And with that, he drove off, leaving me alone again, sort of alone. I got it, said Jimmy. Old Mrs. Thompson. She runs a pharmacy, and she used to give me piano lessons when I was a kid. And she's part of the cult? I asked dubiously. I mean, I don't know for sure. But she was always such a hateful woman, and I did see her talking with the science teacher and Greasy Bob a few times. He shrugged. Although everyone around here talks to everyone at some point, could be just coincidence. We have any other options? I asked. He shrugged again. Not really. Okay then. I said, let's go see old Mrs. Thompson, the evil pharmacist. 10 minutes later, we were standing in front of a large old farmhouse with a long winding fence-lined driveway, complete with dilapidated red barn and grain silo. This is the place, said Jimmy. So what's the plan? Does this place look too picture-perfect to you? I asked, what do you mean? I shook my head. Never mind. So what happened to Mr. Evil Pharmacist? Oh, he passed years ago. Poor man had a stroke while tending the field. A stroke, huh? I asked, turning to look at him halfway up the long dirt drive. Yeah, bless his heart. I'm guessing you haven't been back here since he died? No, why? I stopped and pointed toward the barn, because he's still hanging from the tree next to the barn. He looked to where I was pointing to see the late Mr. Thompson. He was in fact still there, his hands bound with the same blue nylon rope as was around his neck. His eyes bulged as they followed us up the drive. Jimmy's mouth dropped open in shock. Well, that dirty, rotten liar. Why would he go and do a thing like that? Look again, kid. Most people don't bother tying their hands to kill themselves. He gasped. That means... I nodded. Jimmy shook his head. Poor Edgar. Well, that seals it. She has to be one of them. I think you're right, I said, pointing to the house. The old woman stepped out the front door and walked over to an old pickup. She was wearing some kind of dark cloak or robe. She started the truck, and the headlights illuminated the drive. Get down, I said as I ducked behind a bush next to the fence line, then realized who I was talking to and mentally kicked myself. I took the kick back when Jimmy did in fact get down behind the bush next to me. The truck passed. Probably go to wherever the ritual will be taking place. I briefly considered diving into the truck bed as it passed, but quickly dismissed the idea. It was moving too fast, and I didn't think I was stealthy enough to get in without making a sound. When we were sure the truck was gone, we made our way to the farmhouse. I was hoping I could find some clue as to where the ritual would be. Jimmy stepped to the front door and waved me through the glass. I grinned and flipped him off. Can you see anything? I asked. I don't know what to look for, he said, waving his arms. I sighed. Are there any schedules or notes stuck to the fridge that say big secret cult thing at this time? Anything like that? No, nothing here in the front room, which is the only room I have ever been in. Well, and the bathroom one time, but I don't think we'll find anything in there. Damn. Okay, I'll find a way in. I was hoping this was one of those country towns you hear about, where everyone is so friendly they don't even bother locking their doors. Unfortunately, I was disappointed with a locked and deadbolt front and back door, but not totally disappointed. I found one of the side windows had been left cracked open. I slid open the window and looked in. It was the kitchen. I climbed inside, careful not to knock over any of the dozens of dishes stacked precariously by the sink. I looked around the kitchen and dining room. Apparently, there had been some big feasts here, and all the food was just left out. What the hell? What is it? Jimmy called from the front room. Is Mrs. Thompson a bit of a slob? What? No, not at all. She's always been very tidy. It looks like she had company, like a lot of company. A big dinner or something, but they didn't clean any of it up. All the food and dishes are just left out. Why would they do that? I'm not sure, unless they thought there was no need to clean up. Like they weren't coming back. Jimmy continued. I left the disaster of the kitchen and made my way into the front room. Jimmy was staring out the window at Mr. Thompson, dangling from the tree. Isn't there something you can do for him? He asked. I shrugged. I don't know. He most likely can't speak, and even if he could, he seems to be bound there. I started searching through the papers on Mrs. Thompson's desk. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jimmy's head sink low. I cleared my throat. I'm hoping that stopping whatever his wife is doing will be enough to set him free. He nodded slightly, and I went back to my search. Anything yet? Jimmy asked as I came back from searching the bedroom. No. I grumbled as I plopped down on the couch and pulled out my cigarettes. Oh, Mrs. Thompson hates smoking. You shouldn't. He started, then stopped when he saw the look I gave him. He nodded and smiled awkwardly. Right, evil cult lady. Wish I could have won. Really stick it to her. I lit my cigarette and chuckled. How did you die anyway? I asked. He looked down at his feet for a moment, then took a calming breath. Well, it was a typical Tuesday night for the most part, only we weren't as busy as we usually were. My boss, Dave, told me I could take the night off early. He said he was going to close soon anyway, had some work to do at the church or something. I thanked him and headed out the door. I had been home for about an hour when I realized that I forgot to clock out. I was tempted to just say, oh well, and fix my time card on my next shift, but I always had to be a goody two-shoes. That's what my brother used to say anyway. He took another deep, steadying breath before continuing. When I walked back into the office to clock out, I noticed the back door was open. I could hear voices, but couldn't make them out. So I got closer and peered out to the open door. Dave was there, but he wasn't alone. Greasy Bob was there, and another man that I didn't know. He was an older man with white curly hair and dirty clothes. They had him hog-tied in the bed on Bob's truck. He looked up at me and moaned something through the duct tape, covering his mouth. I don't know what it was, but his eyes pleaded for me to do something. Dave had been telling Greasy Bob something about where to take the man, but he stopped at the man's moans for help. They turned around and saw me and I ran. I tried it anyway, but I wasn't quick enough. He sighed long and sad, and that was the end of me. I breathed out a lungful of smoke. Fuck, I'm sorry. He nodded and continued. Afterward, when I figured out I was dead, I learned about the cult. Like I said, Mr. Patterson and Greasy Bob would come into Clucky's and discuss things. And there were always rumors around town about. He trailed off. I looked up at him. What? The rumors. I never thought about it until now, but... What rumors, Jimmy? I demanded. He was pacing the floor. The old chapel on the edge of town. When I was a kid, the older teens at school always used to tell us stories about it being haunted, but I never really believed any of it. I gave him a look that said, really? He shrugged. Well, that was before. And I still don't think it's haunted. I mean, maybe it is, but that's not all. They used to tell stories about seeing dark hooded figures coming and going from the chapel on certain nights. Holy crap, Jonas. I think that's the ritual site. He smiled and put his hand for a high five. Come on, Jonas. Let's go stop a cult. I grinned and got up, putting my cigarette out on the couch and slapping his hand. Let's fucking go. We left the Thompson house and headed for the old chapel. I checked my watch, 9:40 p.m. Still a couple hours till midnight. I thought to myself, I had no idea if midnight mattered, but it seemed like the time to do culty ritual shit to me. It took about 25 minutes to walk across town to the old chapel, even at a brisk pace. We were about 100 yards away from the chapel when Jimmy came to a dead stop. What are you doing? I asked, turning back to face him. I can't go any farther, he said, demonstrating by walking forward and not actually moving. Other kids would go to the chapel on dares, but this is as far as I ever made it. God damn it. I muttered. Okay, well, I guess I'll go see what I can do. You stay here and keep a watch out. For what? He asked. I don't know. Just yell if you see anything. What are you going to do? I shrugged. I'll figure something out. I crouched down in the tall grass by the road and crept up to the big, creepy old building. What the fuck am I doing? I kept asking myself. The old chapel was old to say the least. It had once been painted white, but was now almost all bare wood. Only a few chips of paint still clung to the weathered boards here and there. The windows looked like they had all been broken and boarded up, and a faint orange light poured out from between the boards. The steeple stood tall but warped at an odd angle, and a large cross that stood up on it was partially broken off, making it resemble a capital T. I could hear hushed voices inside, chanting low and ominously. I crept up to a window and tried to see inside, but my view was blocked by old pews shoved against the sides. Through the boards, I could see the ceiling of the chapel. There was a large hole in the roof. If I could get up there, I could get a better view of what was happening. I crept my way around to the back of the building and found the old Mrs. Thompson's pickup. Luckily, it had been parked right up next to the building. I climbed on top of the truck's cab as quietly as I could, then scrambled my way onto the roof, a little less quietly. The roof boards creaked under my weight, and I held my breath, hoping no one had noticed. When there was no sign of anyone coming to see what the noise was, I made my way further up the roof, crawling on my belly. When I reached the edge of the hole, I peered down to see a dozen people. Most of them were dressed in dark robes with hoods up. They walked in a circle around a large pentagram drawn on the floor. Another man stood at the altar, holding a large leather-bound book. He wore a white robe and hood. I leaned out to see better, and the board began to creak more. Suddenly they gave way, and I fell down into the midst of them in a heap of rubble. Luckily, some poor bastard broke my fall. The assembled cultists jumped back at my sudden arrival. Then, one by one, they all gathered round to look down at me. "So I guess this is an AA?" I said between coughs. "You," said the man in white, who I guess was a leader. He removed his hood and glared at me. It was Sheriff Reed. "Evening again, officer. I think I'll take that cell now," I said as I climbed to my feet. "The son of a bitch killed Bob," said one of the cultists behind me. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I was going to ask you the same thing," I said, "but I think I already know." He squinted at me. "Whatever you think you know, you're wrong. So, you're not trying to open a doorway to hell and let out a whole bunch of nasty shit? Pretty much fucking up the whole world." The cultists around me started muttering to each other. "We are doing the world a favor. I know you can't see that, but you will," he said as a smile spread on his face. "You will soon see firsthand. Since you robbed us of one of our number, your blood will have to do." I looked back to see the cultist I had landed on, his neck twisted at an unforgiving angle. "Oops." "Hold him," said the sheriff. I looked around and recognized one of the hooded figures approaching me. "Hey, Mrs. Thompson. Edgar says hello, or at least he would if the rope hadn't crushed his throat." She stumbled back in surprise. "What? How?" But I didn't wait for her to finish. My foot shot out, connecting with the nutsack of the man in front of me. He crumpled the ground as I pivoted and threw a punch at the next cultist. Their nose crunched audibly and blood splattered Mrs. Thompson. Unfortunately, that was about all the damage I managed to do. I tried to fight, but there were too many. Suddenly, something hard impacted the back of my head, and the last thought that ran through my head as my vision went dark was, "Well, shit, this is how I die." I came to some time later, my hands cuffed around a pillar at the back of the chapel. The cultists were chanting something in some language I couldn't understand, maybe Latin? I wasn't sure. I could feel blood sticky on the side of my face. I tried to move, but the cuffs would let me get far. "You're awake," said the sheriff. Just in time. I stood, as well as I could, in time for what? To watch you fuck up the whole world. To watch us save it. And you, whoever you are, get to be a part of it, though you don't deserve it. The sheriff went back to his place behind the altar and raised his hands, addressing the assembly. "My friends, tonight is the long-awaited night. You have all worked so hard to get us to this point, and I am so very grateful to you all." The cultists gave polite cheers and applauded. "This world is sick, my friends, and it will only get sicker. We must stop it. We must bring about the great cleanse." They applauded louder. Just as God cleansed the earth with a great flood, we must now bring upon it the power of the cleansing flame. Only then will the world know true peace and righteousness again. The cultists shouted with joy. "The hour approaches. Bring out the sacrifice." The cultists came and uncuffed me from the pillar. I tried to get away, but it was no use. They drugged me to the center of the pentagram. Sheriff Reed approached me, the book and a knife in his hands. "You must have really bad luck, son. You see, Bob there had volunteered to be the sacrifice, but since you decided to drop in and break his damn neck, looks like you're it." I squirmed in the cultist's grip. "How do you even know this will work? Don't I have to be willing or something?" Someone punched me in the gut, causing me to gasp for air. As he approached, he pricked his finger with the knife. My shirt was ripped open and began drawing something on my chest. Doesn't say anything about willing, only that the sacrifice be marked with the sigil, which now you are. The sheriff opened the book and began reading a passage. The language he spoke, it made no sense. It hurt my head to hear. My vision blurred and cleared, then blurred again. I thought I would pass out, then I saw it. Through the hole in the ceiling of the chapel stood a huge, emaciated figure, towering high and blocking out the night sky, its flesh the color of ash. Two massive wings spread out, flexing and stretching, eager to take flight. There were charred and broken skeletons dangling from the thing's coal-black antlers. Its face was like that of a jackal, and its eyes were deep-set and burning with a fire so hot I could feel the heat from them. As it looked down at me, I saw visions of scorched cities and towns. The oceans boiled and the whole world burned. I knew that there would be no peace on Earth. There would be nothing left but ash and ruin if this thing got out. I could not let that happen. I looked back at Sheriff Reed just in time to see him plunging the knife straight at my heart. I had no other choice. I did something I absolutely hated. Something I had only done once before. I clenched every muscle in my body, and I shifted myself out of the living plane. Every cell in my body screamed out in agonizing pain. It felt like dying, which I guess it kind of was. I could only hold it for a few seconds, but it was enough. The knife passed through me and into the chest of the cultist behind me. I shifted back and fell to the floor, looking back at the cultist with the blade buried in his chest. Everyone gasped. The sheriff started to say something, but was cut off by the cultist's blood-curdling scream. His body began to stretch and expand as skin ripped, and bone snapped. Suddenly his eyes caught fire, and his body exploded, showering everyone with chunks of gore. Just as quickly, the cultist who had been next to him began screaming as his eyes caught fire. I jumped to my feet and ran for the door. I heard the wet pop as the next one exploded and the screaming continued. I shoved through the door and slammed it closed behind me. Maybe I'm an asshole for barring the door shut with them inside, but I did it anyway. One by one, the screaming stopped, accompanied by the sound of 9 more people exploding from the inside out. Then came a great, deep howling roar that seemed to shake the earth. Car alarms went off. Dogs and coyotes howled in the distance. The tone was so low, I felt like my eardrums would burst. There was a sound of strong winds like a hurricane. Heat radiated from the edges of the chapel door. Then all at once the roaring and wind sound faded away into nothing. After a few minutes, when I was pretty sure it was all over, I opened the door and stepped inside. The blood and gore that had covered the place was burnt to ash, but the robes lay there still, empty and smoldering but whole. I walked across the floor to what stood at the center of the ash-covered room. The book, it completely unharmed. I bent down to pick it up and read the inscription on the cover. Liber Vitae Mortis et Ultra, whatever that means. I thought, no clue how those yokels got a hold of something like this. But I figured I had better hang on to it. Wouldn't want it to fall into the wrong hands. Again. Jimmy was standing there waiting for me as I approached. Jonas, are you all right? What happened? And what was that thing standing over the chapel? And why are you covered in blood? You. I laughed and patted him on the shoulder. Let's get out of here. I'll tell you on the way. On the way back into town, we stopped by a pond where I rinsed the blood off of my shirt and out of my hair. Didn't need anyone asking complicated questions. Jimmy was doing enough of that already. I told him what had happened and how I stopped the cult through sheer stupid luck. You mean you went ghost mode? He asked, grinning like a kid. I shook my head. First off, that's fucking stupid, and I'm not calling it that. Second, I really don't know what it is or how I do it. It just seems to be something I can do, though it hurts like hell, and I never want to do it again. A fire truck passed as we walked back up the street toward the bus stop. It looked like it was headed for Mrs. Thompson's place. We sat together on a bench next to the bus station and talked for a while. Jimmy told me stories about his life growing up in the small town. We laughed and joked together. I wondered to myself what was still keeping him here. I had assumed that once this was over, he could move on. It turned out I had been unconscious for longer than I first thought. My watch and phone had broken at some point, so I had no clue what time it actually was. As we sat there talking like two old friends, I could see the first rays of the sun peeking over the treetops. Jimmy stopped halfway through his story. His eyes focused on a man a few blocks away. The man was maybe in his mid-50s, with thinning gray hair and a thick mustache. The man stopped to unlock the front door of a hardware store. I looked back to Jimmy and saw tears in his eyes. Your dad. I asked. He nodded. We had a fight just before Now I understood. I told him I hated him, that I couldn't wait to get away from him. But I didn't mean any of it. I was just angry. What was the fight about? I asked. Jimmy shrugged. I can't even remember. We fought so much about anything and everything. We were just so different. I'd give anything to take it all back. I nodded and got up. What are you doing? I didn't answer, just kept on walking. I stepped through the doors of the hardware store the man had entered and saw him behind the counter, a thermos of coffee in one hand and a newspaper in the other. Excuse me, sir, I said, stepping up and clearing my throat. He smiled. Early bird, huh? What can I help you with today? You don't know me, and this is going to sound a little strange, but I knew your son, Jimmy. He blinked and looked me over. Okay, I just wanted to tell you that he was a good friend. He had a great heart, and he spoke very fondly of you. The smiled sadly. You must not have known him too well. We didn't really get along, especially near the end. Everyone has rough patches. That's part life. He loved you. He may not have shown it at the time, but he always loved you. There were tears in the man's eyes, but he held them back as he nodded again. Well, thank you, young man. I really needed to hear that. Jimmy was standing outside, waiting for me, tears in his eyes as well. Thank you, Jonas. Thank you for that. I just shrugged and looked at the rising sun. Morning already, I'm starving. Oh, hey, you still have the coupon, he said. I dug around in my pocket and pulled out the receipt, crumpled and with a drop of blood on one corner, but still readable. I smiled. One small soda, please, and my free regular fries. I said, placing the coupon down on the counter. The cashier took it and looked it over, before hissing through his teeth. Ooh, sorry, sir. This coupon is only good if you purchase a Clucky combo. I sighed, really? He nodded and slid the coupon back across the counter to me. I'm afraid so. So, I have to buy a combo with fries to get the free fries? That is correct, sir. I shook my head and laughed. Would you still like the small soda? He asked. I stepped out of Captain Clucky's, small soda in hand. Yo, Jimmy, you're not going to believe this. Jimmy? I said again. I glanced around for him, but I already knew. I smiled and chuckled to myself as I pulled out my last cigarette and headed for the bus station. Goodbye, Jimmy. Story 6. I live alone, but every night I wake up with new scratches. Last night, I filmed myself sleeping. Recently, I've been waking up with fresh scratches across my back and chest. I had originally put this down to a restless night's sleep, or maybe even something I had done during the previous day. I have lived alone ever since my wife left me 4 years ago, so there's nobody else in the house. I sometimes hear the odd scraping or knock at night, but always put it down on my thin wall and having active neighbors either side. 2 days ago, I woke up to blood smeared across my pillow and 4 deep scratches going from my left eye down to my jawline. I was now getting quite concerned on what I did to myself while I slept. I had an idea. I could record myself sleeping and show it to a doctor to find out what was causing my aggressive sleeping habits. That evening, I set up my old GoPro camera on my wardrobe to record my sleep. The next morning, I woke to no scratches, but as I looked up to where I had put the camera, it was gone. I looked all over my bedroom. No sign of it. I even pulled out my wardrobe to see if it fell behind. Nothing. So last night, I managed to set up a remote online live feed with a wireless webcam I had bought earlier. I linked it to my computer through the Wi-Fi. I could record my full night's sleep without the risk of losing the data. I woke this morning eager to look at the footage. I had no marks on my body again. I thought it might have been a subconscious thing. I fast-forwarded through a few hours with nothing but me sleeping with the odd toss and turn. At 3:23 a.m., the door handle slowly began to turn. The door edged open, and I saw someone crawl inside my room. It looked like a girl. She was maybe 4 foot tall, pale bone tight skin around her arms and legs. Her clothes ripped, exposing deep wounds that covered almost the entirety of her body. I was, and I am still shaken. Every single hair on my body was standing on end as I witnessed my nightly visitor approach me. She was crawling on all fours, somehow gripping onto the wall, then scurrying across the ceiling. She made her way down the wall above my head. Her head suddenly contorted upwards, facing the camera. Her swaying matted hair partly covered her piercing eyes. In an instant, she darted across the wall and disappeared. A few seconds later, her lifeless face appeared from the side of the camera, strands of hair flowing down her bloodied face. She leaned in closer and whispered the hallowing words from her blue, blistered lips. "Night, night." The feed then stopped. I have watched the video in pure horror 5 times already. I just don't know what to do. Like, how long has she been here? All I want to do is move out. I will upload the video once it is downloaded. I can hear a constant shuffling sound around the house, and I need to get out. I took an image of the webcam. I'll try to upload it. Please help. Story 7. Never leave a make-believe door open. We were playing that day. My sister asked me to watch her daughter while she worked. I didn't mind. I loved that kid. It was the least I could do. She was letting me stay rent-free until I got a job and save some money. Better than living with mom and dad, which feels like the gold medal in the loser Olympics compared to my much cooler silver. I was still a loser, but distant, like a loser twice removed, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. Before leaving for work, my sister left a note with instructions to keep her daughter's routine intact. "Children crave structure," was the last line. Yeah, right, I thought. I remember thinking today would be the best day of my niece's life. We slept in 8 chocolate Thunder Flakes. I kept them in my room because my sister hates sugary cereal. Stayed in our pajamas and watched TV. After a couple of hours, she got bored. "What would you like to do?" I asked. "I want to play house outside." "Would you play too?" "I don't want to play by myself." She had me wrapped around her finger. "Of course I will. I love house." Outside, there's an alley where I've seen kids play. At this time of day, it should be empty. I didn't want to deal with other children. I'm not a fan of people I don't know, even the small ones. The alley led to a play space where 3 others converged, sheltered from the street by protective apartment buildings. A comfortable setup, patio furniture, potted plants. On the ground, a message written in chalk. "Don't leave the door open." The handwriting was bad, probably part of some kid's game. I noticed a basketball hoop and a ball. "Hey, want to shoot some hoops?" I asked. "No. House." She got down on all fours. "I'm Juniper, my sister's dog." "Who should I be?" "You, silly. You're grown up already." She giggled. "Oof," I said, tapping my head playfully. "How could I forget?" "Ruff, Ruff. Juniper's hungry. Ruff, Ruff." She pawed at my leg. "How about some delicious dog food?" I handed her an imaginary bowl. "No, you have to get the bowl from the cupboard." I walked across the play area, pretended to grab a bowl, set it down, and poured make-believe food into it. "Come and get it, Junie." "Ruff, Ruff." She crawled over and ate. I kneeled and ruffled her hair. "Good girl." "Who's a good girl?" "Ruff, Ruff. Juniper has to go potty." "Ruff, Ruff." "Okay, let's go." I pretended to put a leash on her and started walking down the alley. She didn't follow. "You coming?" "You can't go through doors. You have to unlock it first. Are you going to play right?" "My mistake, Junie." I mimed a key, unlocked our imaginary front door, and opened it. We stepped outside our house for little Junie's walk. 20 feet down the alley. "Ruff, Ruff." Juniper gets a treat for going potty. "Ruff, Ruff." I have a candy bar in my jacket back there. Dogs don't eat candy bars. I need a dog treat. Did I say candy bar? I meant dog treat. "Ruff, Ruff." She walked back toward the play area, but stopped short. "You didn't close the door." Something startled her. I should have paid more attention. She abandoned the game, moving to my side. Oh, sorry, I forgot. It's okay, let's get that treat. I'll race you. I jogged to the bench where my jacket lay, slow enough to make it fun for her. But when I got there, she wasn't beside me anymore. She wasn't in the alley. She wasn't anywhere. She had disappeared. I called for her. Silence. I saw the chalk message again. Don't leave the door open. Then I called the police. It's the 4-year anniversary of my niece's disappearance. The family holds a vigil at the park. I hate it. Too sad. Everyone's moving on. They get upset when I say she could still be alive or don't give up hope. Now I keep my mouth shut. I haven't seen her missing posters in a while. I hope they make more. I'm almost there. I can see my sister's empty SUV parked ahead. I stop at a bench and try to bolster my breath. I hate this. A sound flutters through the air, exaggerated footfalls. I look up and see a mime, black and white face paint, red beret, striped shirt. He stopped, staring at me like he's trying to place my face. What? He gives me a look that says, really? Then he glances down at his outfit and silently laughs. I might find this funny if I wasn't about to do sad family stuff. Hey, sorry if this is rude, but it's not a good time, my man. I take out a $5 and try to hand it to him. He snaps his fingers and points at me, like he's suddenly remembering something. Reaching into his pocket, he pulls out one of the missing posters. It's brand new. He points to me, then to her picture, then back at me, shaking his head playfully. He slips the poster back into his pocket and walks toward the middle of the road. I spring to my feet. Hey, that's my niece. Where did you get that? He points at me with a shocked look, then silently laughs again. Why do you have that? Where is she? He's doing the invisible wall trick now. I don't have time for this, asshole. He puts up a finger, signaling me to wait. Then he pantomimes taking off a backpack and sets it in front of him. Excitement flickers in his expression as he slowly begins unzipping the imaginary bag, using his whole body to exaggerate the motion with a dramatic flourish. He pulls it open. She's in there. My niece. I can see her. She's curled into the fetal position, looking so thin, her face sunken. Her eyes squint, struggling to adjust to the light. She sees me, and the nanosecond I realize that she recognizes me. He closes it. He zips the invisible bag shut and slings it onto his back. I sprint toward him, but I slam into the damn invisible wall. He silently laughs. I bang on the barrier, but it won't break. I feel for an opening. There isn't one. He moves beyond the road's meridian. I can't see his lower half anymore. Give her to me. Now. Now, you bastard. Now. He mimes pressing a button, then takes a big step forward, like he's entering something. Another button press. He waves at me. He's starting to descend. I shove past the invisible wall and run faster than ever. His beret dips out of my vision just as I reach the meridian. Gone. She's gone. Again. Story 8. I'm the developer of a ghost hunting app. I'm writing this to explain why I destroyed it, and to beg you not to make the same mistake I did. 3 months ago, I permanently deleted every file associated with a project I called Aura. I wiped the cloud repository, scrubbed the backups from my local drives, and then physically destroyed the hard drives with a drill press in my garage. The noise the drill made, that high-pitched scream as it bit into the magnetic platters, is one of few sounds that can drown out the ringing in my ears. I am writing this now, under a name that isn't mine, from a city I've never lived in before, because last night I saw an article about a new augmented reality game that's about to launch. The description of its dynamic environmental interaction engine sounded terrifyingly familiar. It made me realize my silence is a luxury I can't afford. My silence could get someone else killed. I live in a small, furnished apartment now, the kind that's designed for transient people. The furniture is bland and impersonal, which is how I like it. There are no pictures on the walls, no sentimental clutter. Everything I own fits into 2 suitcases. I have rituals. I check the 3 deadbolts on my door every hour. I never sit in a chair that has its back to a doorway. I've covered the reflective screen of the television with a thick blanket. I sleep with a salt lamp on, not because I believe it does anything, but because it's dim. Orange glow means I never have to wake up in complete darkness. The silence of this place is the hardest part. It's a deep, profound quiet that my brain constantly tries to fill. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the plumbing in the walls becomes a question. Is that just the building settling? Or is it something else? Aura was supposed to be my answer to all that. My way out. It was supposed to be a ghost hunting app, but that was just the marketing angle. The concept itself isn't original, I know. The App Store is flooded with them. Cheap toys that flash random numbers and play spooky sounds. Mine was just going to be better, more elegant. I wasn't a believer. I was a programmer, and a damn good one. And to a programmer, the universe is a system with rules. I saw the paranormal not as a spiritual phenomenon, but as a predictable glitch in human perception. The eye seeing faces and with grain, the ear hearing whispers and static. This is called pareidolia, and I believe I could code an engine that would replicate those patterns on demand. The goal was to create the most convincing illusion of the supernatural ever coded. The app would use a phone's camera and microphone, but the data it collected was mostly a smokescreen. The real work was done by my algorithm. It would analyze the visual input for any random noise, pixel artifacts, lens flare, dust motes, and subtly enhance them into faint, smoky shapes that looked vaguely like figures. The audio component did the same, stringing together snippets of white noise to create the impression of voices. It was a fake. A clever one, but a fake. My masterpiece of deception. My best friend, Mark, was my only beta tester. He was my opposite in almost every way. I saw the world as a complex machine to be understood. He saw it as a magical story to be experienced. We've been friends since our freshman year of college, bonded by a shared love for late-night sci-fi movies and cheap pizza. I remember one night, we were walking back to our dorm through a misty field on campus, and Mark stopped dead. He pointed at a gnarled old oak tree. "Doesn't it look like it's watching us?" he'd whispered, his voice filled with genuine awe. I'd laughed and pulled out my phone, taking a picture and explaining the precise way the shadows and the fog were creating the illusion of a face in the bark. He just shook his head, smiling. "You see the code, Leo," he said. "I see the ghost in the machine." I think, in a way, I was building aura for him. I was trying to prove my point, to show him the code behind the ghost. But maybe I was also trying to give him the magic he so desperately wanted to see. He was my biggest supporter. He didn't see a cynical cash grab. He saw a genuine tool for discovery. He was the one who pushed me, texting me links to local haunted places and begging me to try the app there. One of his favorites was the old Blackwood Mill on the edge of town, a derelict textile factory that had been rotting since the 50s. The EMF fluctuations there would be off the charts, he'd text. I always patiently explained that the increased background noise in an old, drafty building would just give the algorithm more random data to work with, creating better fakes. It was a feature, not a bug. For the first few weeks of the beta test, it was fun. It was our game. He'd send me screenshots of wispy figures in the corner of his room. "I think I have a ghost in my kitchen," he texted one afternoon, along with pictures showing a vague, smoky smudge hovering near his toaster. "Does it want toast?" I replied. He sent back a laughing emoji. "I think it's a gluten-free ghost. It just seems to be vibing." I felt a swell of pride in my work. My code was working perfectly. It was a perfect trick. The turning point was the mill. He finally went against my advice. He called me that night, and the usual excitement in his voice was replaced by something else, something tight and strained. "Leo, I saw something," he said, his voice low. "At the mill. It was different." I settled into my chair, ready to be the voice of reason. "Different how?" "It wasn't like the others," he said. "The ones in my apartment are like smoke. They drift. This one, it was solid. It was in one of the collapsed doorways in the main weaving room. It was just a shape, you know? A tall, black shape. But it didn't move. It just stood there, And when I pointed my phone at it, it didn't fade. It stepped back into the shadows. A prickle of unease ran down my spine, but I squashed it. Mark, the lighting in that place must be a nightmare. The sensors were probably getting confused, creating a hard-edged artifact instead of a soft one. And stepping back, thing was probably just a filter reevaluating the light as you moved. He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said, his voice small, a raw edge to it. It felt like it was watching me. "Leo, it felt wrong. It's one thing for your algorithm to show me smoke, but this felt different, solid, like it knew I was looking." I spent the next 10 minutes patiently explaining the technical reasons for what he saw. I was so sure of myself, so condescendingly logical. I can still hear the resignation in his voice when he finally gave up. "I guess so. Still, I can't shake it." This one felt different. That conversation haunts me now. It was his last chance, his cry for help, and I explained it away with algorithms. A few days later, I pushed the final update to the audio feature. I tweaked it to sound more natural. That night, my phone rang. It was 2:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because my eyes were burning from staring at lines of code, and I was about to finally give up for the night. I almost didn't answer. I wished to God I hadn't. There was no hello, just Mark's shaky breathing and the low, crackling hum of the app. I could picture him perfectly, sitting up in the dark, phone in hand, completely immersed in the illusion I'd built for him. "Leo," he whispered, his voice tight with fear, so profound it sounded like he was being strangled. "It's here. The thing from the mill is in my apartment." Before I could answer, a different sound came through the phone speaker, cutting through the static I had created. It was a voice, but it wasn't the garbled output from my audio engine. This was clear, slow, and raspy, like something was dragging the sound out of a long dead throat. It said his name. "Mark, Mark, Mark." The call dropped. In the silence that followed, I felt a cold dread wash over me. A programmer's dread. The kind you get when your code does something it wasn't designed to do. Something impossible. I had created a filter to fake the paranormal, and something from the other side had just used it to speak. My first reaction was purely technical. My mind raced through the possibilities, desperately trying to find a logical explanation. Did the audio buffer pull a cached soundbite from another app? Was there a memory leak causing it to access and distort a random audio file on his phone? Could it be a prank? Was Mark playing a soundboard to mess with me? That last one felt the most likely. It had to be. He was just getting me back for all the times I'd been a cynical ass about his beliefs. I texted him. "Very funny. You got me." No reply. The little text bubble with the 3 dots didn't even appear. I texted again. "Seriously, call me back." That was a good one. The empty space below my message was deafening. I called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. That's when the programmer's dread was replaced by a more primal, human fear. The kind that starts as a cold knot in your stomach and quickly spreads, leaving ice in its wake. I grabbed my keys and was out the door in 30 seconds. The drive to Mark's apartment complex usually took 15 minutes. I think I made it in 8. Every red light was an accusation. Every empty street corner felt like a judgment. The streetlights smeared past my windshield like watercolor streaks. My mind was a frantic battleground between logic and terror. Logic insisted it was a prank, an elaborate, cruel joke. But terror whispered about the sound of that voice, the way it had stretched his name out like it was tasting it. It wasn't a soundbite. It sounded ancient. I pulled into the parking lot of his building, killing the engine. The silence was heavy. His apartment was on the 3rd floor, corner unit. The lights were off. Of course they were off. It was almost 2:30 in the morning. Still, it felt wrong, like the darkness in those windows was deeper than it should be. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stood outside his door, number 314, and listened. Nothing. I knocked, first gently, then harder. "Mark, it's me, Leo. Open up." Silence. "Come on, man, this isn't funny anymore." The knot in my stomach tightened. I tried the doorknob. Locked. I always carried a small lockpick set on my keychain, a holdover from my teenage years of thinking I was a cool hacker. It felt absurd to be using it now. My hands were shaking so badly it took me almost a minute. The clicks and scrapes of the metal amplified in the silent hallway. I kept expecting to hear him on the other side, laughing at me. The lock finally clicked, loud as a gunshot. I pushed the door open. Mark. The apartment was still and dark. The air was cold and stale. I could see the familiar shapes of his lumpy couch, his cluttered coffee table, the towering shelves of books and graphic novels. On the coffee table was a plate with a half-eaten sandwich. Everything was in its place, but it felt like a museum exhibit, a diorama of a life that had suddenly stopped. "Mark, are you in your room?" I called out, my voice sounding thin and weak. I moved through the living room, my feet silent on the carpet. The door to his bedroom was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and that's when I found him. He was lying on his back in bed, his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling with an expression of profound, frozen shock. His phone was on the floor, beside the bed, face up. The screen was still on, lit by the eerie glow of my app's interface. I think I stopped breathing. For a moment, the world dissolved into a silent, slow-motion vignette. I saw the rumpled sheets, the way his hand was curled on the floor, just inches from the phone, the faint, almost imperceptible tremor in my own hands. Then my lungs remembered their job, and I sucked in a ragged breath. I stumbled forward, my knees hitting the floor beside his bed. "Mark," I whispered, touching his arm. He was cold, not just cool, but a deep, penetrating cold that felt wrong. Unnatural. My gaze fell to the phone. Aura's interface was running, the familiar swirling blue and purple background pulsing gently. But in the center of the screen, where the spectral shapes were supposed to appear, was an image. It wasn't one of my fake, smoky wisps. This was sharp, detailed, and utterly terrifying. It was a face, gaunt and narrow, with deep-set, empty sockets where eyes should have been. The skin was tight over the cheekbones, like dried parchment. The mouth was a thin, lipless slash, twisted into a silent snarl of utter malice. It was rendered in perfect high-definition clarity against the backdrop of Mark's own bedroom ceiling, as if the app was looking back at him from the other side. It was a predator's face, and it was looking right at the camera. At me. I scrambled back, knocking over a glass of water on his nightstand. The sound shattered the silence, and reality came crashing back in. I fumbled for my own phone, my fingers thick and clumsy, and dialed 911. The dispatcher's calm, professional voice was an anchor in a swirling sea of horror. I choked out Mark's address, babbling something about my friend not breathing. The paramedics arrived first, then the police. 2 officers, a man and a woman, separated me from the paramedics and started asking questions. I told them the truth, or a version of it. I was his friend. He called me, sounded strange. I came over to check on him. I found him like this. The male officer, whose name was Miller, picked up Mark's phone. He looked at the screen, his brow furrowed. "What is this?" he asked, showing it to me. The face was still there, frozen on the screen. "It's an app," I said, my voice hoarse. "A game, a ghost hunting thing. He was testing it for me." Miller grunted, a sound of mild disapproval. He showed it to his partner. She squinted at it. "Creepy," she said, and handed it back. He tapped the screen, but the image was frozen. He had to hard reboot the phone to get it to turn off. When it came back on, the image was gone. Just a normal lock screen with a picture of a nebula. They saw a creepy picture from a game. I saw a photograph of a murderer. The official cause of death came the next day. A massive, spontaneous stroke. Sudden adult death syndrome. They said the look on his face was common in such cases. The result of the brain's final, catastrophic misfire. The call to his parents was the hardest thing I've ever done. I listened to his mother's sobs, telling her what the doctors had said, the lies feeling like poison on my tongue. How do you tell a mother that her son is dead because you accidentally coded a doorway to hell? I went home from the police station and locked the door. I didn't turn on any lights. I just sat on my couch in the dark, the silence of my own apartment feeling loud and threatening. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the building settling, every distant siren was a potential threat. My carefully constructed world, built on logic and code, had been shattered. I had opened the door, and I had no idea how to close it. The first week was a haze of grief and guilt. I didn't touch my computers. The thought of looking at Aura's code made me physically ill. I was done. The project was over. I wanted to believe that if I just walked away, it would all stop. But then the subtle things started happening. It began subtly. I'd find the pantry door, the one I'd explicitly checked before leaving, nudged open by an inch, its shadow stretching too long across the linoleum. My keys, meticulously hung on the hook by the door, would mysteriously reappear on the coffee table, resting precisely where I'd left them only moments before, yet inexplicably moved. I blamed it on grief, on exhaustion. My mind was playing tricks on me. I told myself. Then came the cold spots. One evening, an intense, localized chill descended, sharp as a winter breath. It wasn't just a temperature drop. The air itself felt heavy, thick with metallic tang, and my breath plumed visibly before my face. I gasped, goosebumps erupting across my skin. It felt like standing in front of an open freezer door. I got up, but the frigid pocket followed, clinging to me like a shroud. I walked into the kitchen, and the patch of freezing air moved with me, a pocket of winter in my heated apartment. I even grabbed a digital thermometer. The air in the kitchen was 72 degrees. The air in the cold spot was 45. Then, as abruptly as it arrived, the air warmed, leaving only the ghost of an icicle down my spine. The shadows were harder to explain. From the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement, a tall, dark shape, would dart past the doorway to the hall. My head would snap around, but there was always nothing there. It left behind only a chilling residue, a sense of something having been there, something that vanished the moment I tried to focus. The breaking point came about 3 weeks after Mark's death. I was in the shower, the one place I felt I could let my guard down. The hot water and steam were a temporary shield against the creeping dread. I was rinsing the shampoo from my hair when I heard it. A whisper. It was faint, almost lost in the hiss of the water, but it was unmistakable. It was that same dry, scraping voice from the phone call, and it said my name. Leo. I froze, shampoo suds dripping into my eyes. The water suddenly felt icy cold. My heart hammered against my ribs. I shut off the faucet, plunging the bathroom into a near-silent state. The only sound of frantic thumping in my chest and the slow drip, drip, drip from the shower head. Who's there? I called out, my voice a pathetic croak. Silence. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, naked and vulnerable, straining my ears. Nothing. Had I imagined it? Was I finally losing my mind? No. I knew what I had heard. It was in my apartment. It had followed me from Mark's. Or worse, it hadn't followed me. It had just changed its focus. The app was a window. Mark had looked through it, and it had taken him. Now it was my turn. I was the one who had built the window. I stumbled out of the shower, grabbing a towel. My mind was racing. I couldn't live like this, haunted by shadows and whispers, waiting for the final, terrifying confrontation. I had to know. I had to see it. I had to understand what I was up against. There was only one way to do that. My hands were shaking as I walked to my desk and picked up my phone. I hadn't looked at the app since that night. My thumb hovered over the icon for Aura, a stylized, swirling letter. Part of me was screaming not to do it, to just run, to leave everything behind. But another, more desperate part needed to see. I had to turn the lie I had created into a tool for truth. I tapped the icon. The app loaded, the familiar purple and blue interface filling the screen. It looked so innocent, so harmless. I took a deep breath and stood up, holding the phone like a shield. I activated the main filter. I panned the phone across my living room. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The screen just showed my apartment, tinted with the app's signature, ethereal glow. Then, the algorithm started doing its job. A few fake wisps of smoke appeared near a bookshelf, faded, and then disappeared. I almost let out a sigh of relief. It was just a stupid app. It was all in my head. Then I pointed the phone towards the darkest corner of the room, near the hallway entrance where I'd seen the shadows move. The phone screen flickered violently. The gentle, swirling colors of the interface glitched, dissolving into a mess of green and black pixels for a second, like the app was struggling to process what was seeing. My phone grew hot in my hand. Then the image resolved. It wasn't a wisp. It wasn't a smoky, vague shape. Standing in the corner of my room was a figure. It was tall and unnaturally thin, a stark, black silhouette that seemed to absorb the light around it, making the shadows in the corner look pale by comparison. It was featureless, a void in the shape of a man, but it had presence. It had weight. As I watched, frozen in place, it slowly turned its head to look at me. There was no face, no eyes, but I felt its gaze lock onto me through the phone. A wave of pure, undiluted malevolence washed over me, a psychic pressure that made my teeth ache and my vision swim. Then the audio feed crackled to life. It wasn't the pre-programmed static. It was a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the phone, a sound of pure hate. I had built a window, and now the thing on the other side was looking back. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The sound was trapped in my throat, choked off by a terror so profound it felt like a physical weight on my chest. I lowered the phone, my arm trembling uncontrollably. I looked at the corner with my own eyes. Nothing, just shadows. But I knew it was there. I could feel it. The air was thick with its presence, heavy and cold. I raised the phone again. The black figure was still there, motionless, watching me. I took a stumbling step back, and its head tilted, a gesture of cold curiosity. The low growl from the phone speaker deepened, and underneath it, a voice began to coalesce from the static. Leo, the architect. The voice was the same dry rasp I'd heard before, but clearer now, stronger. It was using my app as a megaphone, focusing its energy through the very code I had written. I dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, the screen showing the ceiling. I scrambled away, crab-walking backward until my back hit the opposite wall. My eyes locked on an empty corner. I could hear the voice still coming from the phone speaker, a distorted, mocking whisper. "Open the door." I spent the rest of the night huddled on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, with every light in the apartment blazing. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that featureless black silhouette, that void in the shape of a man. The entity, my entity, was here. It was real, and it knew my name. The next day, I became an investigator in my own horror story. Fueled by a desperate, terrified energy, I turned to the only thing I knew, the code. If I had created the problem, then somewhere in the millions of lines of code, there had to be a solution. There had to be an off switch. I sat at my computer, forcing myself to open the Aura project files. Looking at the familiar interface of my coding environment felt profane. This workspace, which had once been my sanctuary, now felt like a crime scene. I pulled up the core files for the Pareidolia filter and the audio engine. I had been so proud of its design. It was supposed to work by taking random input and forcing a pattern onto it. But what if it wasn't forcing a pattern? What if it was detecting one? What if the random energy fluctuations it was reading weren't random at all? I dove into the audio processing module first, since that was the source of the voice. I had built a sophisticated noise generator that was seeded by the microphone's raw input. It was meant to capture ambient sound, strip out recognizable frequencies, and use the remaining junk data to create its EVP effect. My terrifying hypothesis was that the entity was somehow embedding its voice into that junk data. For hours, I analyzed the code, running simulations, checking data flows. And then I found it, a single, elegant, and catastrophic flaw. In my attempt to create a more natural-sounding static, I had created a recursive feedback loop. The app wasn't just listening to ambient noise. It was listening to the static it was producing, processing it, and then feeding it back into the system. It was a closed loop designed to refine the randomness. Instead, it had turned my app into a kind of sonic focusing lens. It was amplifying a frequency I couldn't hear, a carrier wave in the noise, making it stronger and stronger until it became a bridge. The entity wasn't just speaking into the microphone. It It was using the feedback loop to power its own manifestation, to pull itself into our world. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't built a fake ghost detector. I had built a real ghost amplifier. A sudden, sharp crack from the kitchen made me jump out of my chair. My heart leaped into my throat. I crept out of my office, my every nerve screaming. On the kitchen floor in 1,000 pieces was a ceramic mug that had been sitting on the counter a good 2 feet from the edge. "Clever boy," the voice whispered. This time, it wasn't from the phone. It was in the room with me, a faint, sibilant hiss that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You understand the logic, Leo. Now feel the consequence." I ran back to my desk, my hand shaking. The haunting was escalating. The subtle events were giving way to overt, physical displays. It was getting stronger, and my app was its battery pack. Over the next few days, my life became a living hell. The entity grew bolder. It was a constant, oppressive presence. I would be working, and a book would fly off a shelf behind me. The lights would flicker and die, plunging me into darkness, only to flare back on moments later. The whispers were no longer just whispers. They were taunts. I used the app sparingly, only when I absolutely had to know where it was. Each time, the image of the black silhouette became slightly more defined. I started to see hints of a shape within the void, something emaciated and twisted. The growls and whispers from the audio feed grew in clarity. "Mark, scream for you." It hissed at me one night, the voice coming from my phone speaker as I watched the silhouette stand motionless by my bedroom door. "He knew you left him." "Shut up," I whispered back to the empty room, tears of rage and terror streaming down my face. "You built the door," it continued, its voice a venomous caress. "Now you must pay the toll. All who build the doors must pay." It was feeding on me, on my fear, my guilt, my focus. The more I interacted with it, the more I researched the code, the more I thought about it, the stronger it became. My attempt to understand my prison was only reinforcing the bars. I tried to find answers outside of my own code. I spent sleepless nights trawling the darkest corners of the internet, paranormal forums, occult wikis, digitized versions of crumbling old grimoires. I learned about resonant frequencies, about entities drawn to focus human will, about the idea of digital sigils. The consensus, from madmen and scholars alike, was terrifying and consistent. To create a connection, you need a symbol and you need energy. I had created a digital symbol, the app itself, and a machine that generated its own energy. I had, in my blind arrogance, stumbled upon a recipe for summoning a demon and had written it in Python. I even found a ghost of a story on an obscure developer forum from 6 years prior. A user with a now-deleted account posted a frantic message about an unintended audio feedback phenomenon in an AR project he was working on. He described hearing voices in the static, voices that knew his name. The few replies dismissed him as a crank or a troll. 3 days after his initial post, his account went silent. He never logged in again. Reading it felt like finding my own tombstone, already carved. The entity started using Mark against me. One afternoon, I heard the faint sound of music coming from my living room. It was a deep cut from an obscure indie band that Mark and I had seen live years ago. Our song we used to joke. It was coming from my speakers, which were unplugged. The taunts became more specific, laced with details of my past that only Mark could have known. It was proof that it hadn't just killed him, it had violated him, perhaps even absorbed fragments of his being. It had his memories. The breaking point, the moment I knew I had to act, came on a Tuesday night. I had been awake for nearly 48 hours, staring at code, trying to find a way to reverse the feedback loop. I must have drifted off at my desk. I was jolted awake by the sound of my bedroom door slamming shut with enough force to shake the wall. I grabbed my phone and activated Aura. I pointed it down the hall. The black figure wasn't standing in the corner anymore. It was moving. It was slowly, deliberately gliding down the hallway, directly towards my office. And it wasn't just a silhouette. The filter was now resolving a horrifying form within the blackness. Long, spindly limbs that moved with a jerky, unnatural gait. A skeletal frame draped in what looked like rags of shadow. And the face from Mark's phone, was now visible, a snarling mass of ancient evil. The audio wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a clear, cold conversational voice. "Time is up, Leo. I'm tired of the waiting room." I could hear with my own ears now. A faint echo of the voice from the phone. The barrier was breaking down. Soon I wouldn't need the app to see it or hear it. It was manifesting. That was it. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't contain it. My only option was to destroy the connection, to burn the bridge. The entity was at the doorway to my office now. Through the phone, it was a towering, horrifying monster. With my own eyes, it was a shimmering distortion in the air, a place where the light seemed to bend and warp around a point of absolute cold. A glass on my desk rattled, then slid to the edge and shattered on the floor. My mind raced, formulating a desperate plan. The code, the app, the servers, they were the anchor. The digital footprint was the doorway. I had to erase every last trace of it. I sat down at my keyboard, my fingers flying. The entity was in the room with me now. The cold was intense, biting. My breath plumed in front of my face. Through the phone, which I had propped up on the desk, I could see it looming over me, its featureless face inches from mine. "You built this cage, architect. You are bound to it." It hissed, the sound both in my ears and in my head. A wave of pressure slammed into me. The air grew thick, like I was moving through water. My vision swam. The entity on the screen let out a shriek, a sound of digital feedback and tearing metal. I started with a remote repository, the master source of the code stored in the cloud. I opened my terminal, fingers flying, and type git push, delete origin master. The command, to erase the primary branch, executed. A wave of pressure slammed into me. The air grew thick, like I was moving through water. My vision swam. The entity on the screen let out a shriek, a sound of digital feedback and tearing metal. Next, the backups. I had them stored on a separate cloud server. I logged in, my fingers fumbling on the keys. The lights in my office flickered violently. My monitor buzzed, the text blurring. The door. The entity roared, the voice seeming to shake the very foundations of the building. I felt an icy, crushing grip on my shoulder. It was real, not just a feeling of cold, but the distinct, sharp pressure phantom fingers digging into my muscle. I cried out in pain, arching my back. But I didn't stop typing. I navigated to the directory and initiated the delete command. rm rf/or_backups. The grip vanished, but the cold intensified. The monitor went black. No! I didn't panic. I knew the keyboard shortcuts by heart. I kept typing blind, confirming the deletion. I hit enter. The monitor flickered back on, showing a confirmation message. The backup files were gone. Only my local files remained. 2 drives, a primary solid-state drive, and a secondary hard drive for storage. I opened the File Explorer. The entity was raging now. The distortion in the air was churning, violent. The papers on my desk swirled into the air as if caught in a whirlwind. A framed picture of me and Mark flew off the wall and shattered against the door. "You cannot close what you have opened." I selected the Aura project folder on my main drive. My hand hovered over the delete key. I could feel its focus on me, a pressure on my mind that was trying to break my will. I saw an image of Mark's face in my mind, his eyes wide with terror. I slammed the delete key. "Are you sure you want to permanently delete these files?" "Yes." A piercing shriek filled the room, a sound of pure agony that was both physical and psychic. It threw me back from my desk, my chair skidding across the floor. On my phone, the entity's form was dissolving, unraveling like a corrupted video file, its pixels shredding into nothingness. I crawled back to the desk, ignoring the pain in my head. 1 drive left, the secondary storage. I selected the final directory, my final sin. Just as my finger touched the key, I felt it, icy, unseen hands closing around my throat. The pressure was immense, cutting off my air. My lungs burned. Black spots danced in my vision. This was it. This was how it ended. Just like Mark, with the last of my strength, my vision tunneling to a single point. I lunged forward and hit the enter key with the palm of my hand. The pressure vanished. The screaming stopped. The whirlwind in the room died. The distortion in the air dissipated. The figure on my phone screen dissolved into a final shower of static, and then the app crashed, returning the screen to my normal home page. Everything was silent, utterly, completely silent. I lay on the floor, gasping for air, my throat raw. The cold in the room slowly receded, replaced by the normal, ambient temperature. I sat up, my body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. It was over. I had done it. I had closed the door. For a long time, I just sat on the floor of my ruined office, surrounded by broken glass and scattered papers, and I cried. I cried for Mark. I cried out of sheer, gut-wrenching terror. And I cried with a sliver of relief, so profound it was painful. Eventually, I got up. I packed a bag. I walked out of my apartment without looking back. The next day, I went to my garage, took the hard drives from my computer, and drilled holes through them until they were nothing but shattered platters and ruined electronics. I drove for 2 days, putting as much distance between me and that place as I could, which brings me to now, 3 months later. I live in a small, anonymous apartment in a city where no one knows my name. The whispers are gone. The shadows are gone. The cold spots are gone. The entity I gave form to is gone. It's anchored to this world destroyed. But I am not free. I have a new fear now. A quieter, more insidious one. Before, when the haunting was at its peak, I had the app. I had my terrible lens. I could turn it on and see my tormentor. I knew where it was. I could see the monster in the corner, the demon in the hallway. I could face my enemy. Now I am blind. I sit in the dark of my new apartment, and the silence is the loudest thing I've ever heard. Every creak of the floorboards in the apartment above, every gust of wind against the window pane, every unfamiliar groan of a new building settling sends a jolt of pure ice through my veins. Last week, a floorboard in my own hallway creaked when I was sitting perfectly still in the living room. I spent the next 6 hours sitting on a kitchen stool with my back against the wall, watching the hallway until the sun came up. It was probably just the buildings old with contracting. Probably I destroyed the door I built. I have to believe that. But what if it didn't need the door anymore? What if all my app did was teach it how to notice us? What if it's just weaker now, biding its time? I have no way of knowing. I have no way of checking. I have removed my only sense that could perceive the world I now know for a fact is real. The terror of seeing the monster is nothing compared to the terror of knowing it's there and not being able to see it at all. It could be standing in the corner of this room right now, watching me type these words, a silent, gaunt spectator to my confession. And it could be smiling, remembering the taste of my friend's fear. I don't know, and I will never know again. That is my true haunting. So please, if you are a programmer, a creator, a dreamer, and you have an idea like the one I had, leave it alone. Don't build the door. Don't even draw the blueprints. Some things in the dark are meant to stay there, unseen, because once you see them, they see you too. And even if you manage to close your eyes, you'll never be able to forget that they're still there, watching. Story 9. My family was stalked by supernatural beings. One day they completely ruined my life forever. June 22nd, 2024. This is a day to which I have kept close to my mind ever since it occurred. A day that will fester inside my head for however many years I am left on this earth. It was supposed to be a date of celebration and happiness, but turned into the greatest tragedy of my life. And now, I fear that what had happened then has come to haunt me again like it did only a year ago. To talk about that day is to talk about my son, me, and my husband's miracle child. We had both been trying hard for a child for a year, but we didn't have any success. We both made an appointment with our doctor, hoping he could help, and if not, see if IVF was possible. All our hopes were dashed after our doctor came back with our testing results. I'm sorry, ma'am. It seems we have some troubling news. I had been dreading those words. I asked him to elaborate, still holding out for the smallest hope there could be that everything would be all right. It seems almost as though all your ovaries have ceased production on egg cells, much like how a uterus post-menopause would act. I'm sorry, but this means that kids are completely off the table. I froze, unable to speak. I never imagined anything like this. Didn't think this could happen to someone like me. He went over more of the results. But I couldn't focus on a single word, his voice becoming a loud ringing that echoed within my head. My husband brought me home, reassuring me in my daze. His gentle words felt like band-aids on gaping wounds. Nothing could make me feel better. Nothing could shake the fact that I wouldn't be able to have the life I've always wanted. I spent the whole night crying in bed, mourning over my lost future. I prayed to every sort of higher power I knew that somehow, someway, all this could be fixed. I didn't so much sleep that night, more so pass out from exhaustion. The next morning I woke up feeling sick. But it was different, not the usual sickness associated with colds and the flu. In a bit of desperation, I took out my last pregnancy test, if only to see if a miracle could have happened, that somehow devotion would win out over reality. It tested positive. I should have asked more questions, done more tests, but I was just so blinded by joy that the logical part of my brain shut off. It was almost like a dream that lasted until about 18 years after his birth, a dream that eventually morphed into a nightmare. My family was never particularly religious, so that was the same way I raised my son. However, one way or another, he ended up becoming a very pious Christian. He went to services every Sunday and would even try to drag us there. He made sure to say grace every time before we ate dinner. Hell, he even wanted us to send him to a Catholic high school instead of the public one. We were still supportive, if not a little confused about how this came up, but didn't pay it any mind. I tell you this because when my son came home one day and went straight to prayer in his room, we weren't that concerned. My husband even made a little joke the first day about how he was late for his appointment with God. But soon, this began happening almost every day. I came to confront him about this, thinking he may be bullied, or worse. Mom, it's fine. It's just never mind. Honey, it's okay if something happened at school today. You can tell us. We're here for you. He then looked at me with pleading eyes, not ones of embarrassment, but ones of fear. I can't. I don't want anything to happen to you. Oh, come on. I can handle a few mean kids. No, it's not. Please just leave me alone. I knew I wasn't getting anywhere, so I just reassured him we were there for him and left him alone. I always blame myself for not prying, for not digging deeper. Maybe I could have stopped what was to come, but my desire to be a good parent came in the way. My son started bringing home a lot more Christian artifacts, if that's what they're called. He put crosses on his door, sprayed holy water around his room, not to mention started carrying around a rosary. One day, while we were coming back from a day out, he brought a priest to the house. I have no idea what they did there, but that was the final straw. We talked many times after each new development, but it was then we put our foot down, making it known we were getting concerned for his mental health. He never told us, though, but as soon as we pressed him, tears started rolled down his face. He pleaded with us that he wasn't crazy, and that of all things, he was being stalked by demons. What the fuck? My husband was shocked. He looked at me in a way that signaled I was better suited for this discussion. Listen, honey, I think you just might be seeing shadows or something. I highly doubt that demons would dash. They're real. I see them everywhere. They have these black robes with pointed tops and a blank void where their face should be. That could... I didn't want to suggest he was hallucinating, that my miracle child might be developing some sort of mental disorder, but I couldn't find a suitable excuse. They're in my room as well. I can hear them whispering at night. With that, my husband jumped out of his seat, chasing after him. I ran outside to hear he was calling the crisis hotline. He explained everything to them before turning back to me. I'm sorry for running out like that, but I didn't want to scare him. Do you really think that a psych ward is what's best? What other choice do we have? If he doesn't feel safe with us, what makes you think we can help? We stayed with him until the ambulance came and took him, and stayed with him while he got checked in with the staff, and stayed with him while he was introduced to his room. It broke my heart to see my child like that, but I knew there wasn't a choice. Then the figures came. It happened after I came back from visiting my son in the hospital. I had just taken a shower and was walking by my son's room, and I could have sworn I saw someone standing there. It was only there for a second before it completely went away. It looked exactly like how my son described them. Tall, cloaked figures with voids where their faces should be. Yet, despite the lack of a face, I could still see something there. Whatever it was, it made my fight or flight instinct activate. I ran to my bedroom and started to break down. Was my son not really crazy after all? Or they could get to him more easily now that he was away from my supervision? That thought made me immediately get dressed and run out toward the hospital. My husband tried to stop me, but I pushed him out. To be honest, I should have told him when it first happened, but so many things were going on in my head that thought never popped up. I demanded to make sure he was all right at the desk, and when he came out to see me, I knew everything was okay. That was when I started to sage his room in the ward every night before I left. I am not particularly spiritual, but I wasn't willing to take any risks. I saw the figures regularly after that. Always there 1 second, gone the next. Sometimes I could feel the presence of one right in front of me when my eyes were closed. I heard bizarre sounds during the night, always sound like a whisper, but when focused on was almost an imitation of a voice. The strange thing was that these things always seemed to remind me of something, but I couldn't figure out what. Still, if they were harassing me instead of my child, I would take it. That brings me to my son's birthday, June 22nd, 2024. He was getting better, said he didn't see the demons as much, and was almost able to be released. We planned for him a big party for when he got home. Just one more night, and he would be free. When we went to visit him the day before, my husband took notice of the sage I used in his room. He urged me to leave it, that I would just make him naris and maybe even relapse. To tell the truth, I didn't even know if it was helping, so I believed him. The next day, my son disappeared from his room. No one could explain it. No window was open. No door was unlocked. All that was left was a shadow on the bed. My husband became almost comatose from that day on. No one could explain it, but he knew he was responsible. He began to sit outside on our porch all day, waiting for our son to come home. I stopped seeing the figures after that, but it didn't matter. The miracle that had been gifted to us was gone. I couldn't even open my son's room. The memories were too painful. Eventually, I gained the strength to go in there, and by the broken cross on the floor that something was amiss. Inside, every religious thing my son had was broken and shattered. It stood with some sort of sick joke by whatever followed us. The most important thing, though, was on the bed. It was a photograph of us when my son was still a baby. And when I looked closer, everything came together. Many years ago, I went to a festival that was styled after a pagan celebration. It wasn't a real pagan festival, more like a camping trip, where we did some arts and crafts and hung out with some friends. No rituals or sacrifices, just people being friendly. The road people were there, but didn't say anything. They turned slowly, almost menacingly, and never participated in any events. However, they seemed to want to take glances at my child. I stayed far away from them, and even went up to the managers to get them removed. But they were always there watching my baby. We left early that year and never came back. They were in that photo, in the back, watching us. On the back of that photo was a message. Your child will be returned 1 year from this day. It has been almost 1 year from that day now. I don't see the figures, but I hear something in the night. Something almost tortured, but still inhuman underneath. Like something trying to be what it once was, but failing. Like something is trying to fight against the malice within itself, but can't. It is so quiet. It is almost hard to hear it, but once you do, it becomes the loudest sound you've ever heard. Mom,